The Elemental Wizard of Hogwarts Chapter 201-220. Chapter 201-Absent Lupin. The Sorting Hat in the headmaster's room was worried that Seal didn't know it, but even if he knew, Seal wouldn't take it to heart. After all, for Seal, this castle was almost the link that ran through Ciel's 2 lifetimes. In the past life, I could only watch it on the screen, but now I am walking in this castle that has stood for thousands of years. No matter who Seal is, he will not allow anyone to destroy the dream in his heart in 2 lifetimes. Yawning, Seal walked tiredly to the entrance of the hall. To be honest, Seal, who rarely stayed up late, had a solid relapse tonight. After the excitement of mastering the secret past, all Seal felt at this time was only infinite fatigue. As soon as he walked to the entrance of the hall, Seal met Lupin, who was sitting bored at the entrance of the auditorium with a newspaper on a chair from nowhere. There was also a small table next to it, and there were some coffee and refreshments on the small table. Lupin greeted Seal happily when he saw Seal coming over. "Hey, Charles, are you all right? To be honest, I was surprised to learn that you were also in charge of the night watch tonight." The corners of Ciel's mouth twitched as he watched Lupin's operation at the entrance of the auditorium. For some reason, Lupin seemed to be in a good mood at the moment, and he didn't even have the slightest sleepiness in the middle of the night. Seeing that Seal didn't reply, but looked at the food and coffee on the table with a smile on his face, Lupin reacted, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in charge of the vigil tonight, how can I come here?" Order. After speaking, he did not forget to point to the coffee and tea shop on the table, with a little embarrassment in his eyes. The corner of Ciel's mouth twitched, and he replied a little embarrassedly, "No, thank you, I'm a little tired. I'll go to rest first. Professor Lupin has worked hard for you tonight." Hearing Ciel's words, Lupin was very happy to let the door open, and even didn't forget to ask Ciel to be quiet when Ciel opened the door, and many of the classmates fell asleep. Ciel nodded and slipped into the hall in embarrassment. To be honest, Ciel was not used to Professor Lupin's excessive enthusiasm tonight. But Ciel didn't notice at all. After Ciel entered the lobby, Lupin, who had closed the door, let out a relieved expression. After all, Lupin had not forgotten that Ciel was wearing a blood-red flame in class. Look. In addition, since last year, there have been some good deeds of pure-blooded privately advocating the identity of the 3rd-generation Dark Lord of Ciel. Lupin was really afraid that Ciel would accidentally kill him or something. After all, he had just established contact with his former friend Sirius, and he still needed time to verify Sirius' words. Thinking of Peter in Sirius's mouth, Lupin's eyes couldn't help but list 3 points coldly. If it was true, then he might really give Peter an unforgettable revenge with Sirius. As for Ciel, he didn't think much about it at all. After all, Ciel was already very tired at this time. There were too many things that shattered the 3 views of Ciel this night, but Ciel, who just entered the hall, felt that he should add another one. As soon as Ciel entered the hall, he found the trio lying at the door. Although the little girl was too sleepy, she still stood firm and waited for Ciel. Instead, it was Harry and Ron. At this time, these 2 people hugged each other very hotly and fell asleep. Harry even farted when Ciel came in. At this moment, Ciel misses his mobile phone very much, even if it is Nokia. Other things not to mention, if you take a photo, you can definitely corrupt these 2 goods for a lifetime. Fortunately, there was still Hermione to treat her injured eye, and Hermione lived up to expectations. When she saw Ciel coming in, she called out to Ciel in a low voice, and then pointed to her side with a red face and reserved it for Ciel. Empty sleeping bag. Ciel was not polite, and resolutely got into the sleeping bag next to Hermione, just when Ciel wanted to tease this sleepy girl after she lay down, but she was still walking forward and waiting for her little girl. Turning around, Hermione fell asleep almost instantly after seeing that Ciel had returned safely, facing Zhengxiang who was sleeping with Ciel. After watching for a while, Shatter couldn't bear to wake the little girl, rubbed her eyes helplessly and fell asleep. Early the next morning, when Ciel woke up, he found himself lying on the bed in Gryffindor's dormitory, presumably the work of the house elf after the alarm was lifted last night. Almost quietly sent all the students back to their dormitories, which is exactly what house elves are good at. Fortunately, today is still the weekend, otherwise, according to the messy dorm in the auditorium last night, it is estimated that many little wizards will be late today, including Seal of course. Many of the little wizards who realized that they were still in the arms of the weekend made the same choice as Seal, covering the quilt and continuing to sleep. A few can. Soon it came to Monday, and countless little wizards had only one feeling, that is, they felt that they had lost a day of vacation for no reason. After all, on a rare weekend, they slept a whole because of an exciting sleep together. A little unhappy in my heart. Of course, these people definitely don't include Seal. At this time, Seal is sitting in the class of Defense Against the Dark Arts with a refreshing feeling. After the last boggart incident, Professor Lupin is obviously a lot more careful. Although they will still be allowed to do it, they still restore the original appearance of the classroom honestly. Just as all the little wizards were looking forward to what the day would be like, the door of the classroom was suddenly pushed open, and the person who came in was not Professor Lupin that the little wizards expected, but Snape. I saw Snape with a black face, unfolding his cloak and walking into the classroom like a big bat, waving his wand as he walked to close the classroom windows. When Snape stood on the podium, he showed a complacent look, and then his face became serious almost in an instant, and he said with an unwavering attitude, "Professor Lupin is asking for leave today. I'll take the class. Now turn the book to page 394. As soon as Snape's voice fell, Hermione stood up immediately. "Professor, we just learned about red hats and hink-punks. Nocturnal animals should be a few weeks away." Snape didn't pay any attention to Hermione, just glanced at Hermione lightly, and began to spread out the book and start the lecture. After the class, Ron and Harry looked at Hermione sitting beside Seal with a look of horror, and Ron even more cautiously stabbed Harry sitting beside him. "Hey, Harry, when is she? Come in, do you see it?" Harry shook his head mechanically, and then the two of them spent almost the entire class staring at Hermione beside Seal with expressions of doubt about life. Chapter 202-Excess and Competition. Seal was in a state of magical thinking throughout the class, shielding almost all perceptions from the outside world, thinking with all his strength about what happened the night before. In fact, when I think about it now, whether it's Ravenclaw or the Sorting Hat, many things in their words are ambiguous. Even their teacher, Dumbledore, seems to have started to fish this semester. This made Seal feel that it was really a headache, and it was definitely not because he was too stupid that he couldn't understand what they meant, absolutely. Because Seal's thoughts were all that night, naturally he was in no mood to listen to Snape's defense against the dark arts class, and Snape didn't care. After all, strictly speaking, if Seal lifted the seal, no dark magic creature can still survive after 4 elemental rounds. Snape naturally looked very open, and didn't care about Seal's distraction. Even Harry or Hermione, who liked sarcasm the most, forgot to sarcasm, completely ignoring the existence of several people. This ignorance made Harry and Ron unhappily happy, but Hermione frowned and looked at Snape, who was constantly reading the text on the podium with a dissatisfied expression. In fact, if I had to say it, Snape's teaching was quite good, not only pointed out the knowledge points in the text, but also added a lot of little knowledge that was not in the book. This was also the reason why Hermione was listening while clenching her back molars. After all, learning knowledge was what Hermione cared about most. As for Charles, Hermione has given up. She was a good student, but unfortunately, at the end of the second year, she actually started to say that she had a phobia of lack of firepower. As long as it's a class that Seal doesn't like, such as this defense against the dark arts class, Seal will be on the go. Hermione has said it many times, but it's all told by Seal that a word of mouth is the truth. The reason for killing dark creatures, it is nothing more than that the caliber is not large enough, the magic is not ruthless, and the magic is too shallow. Every time Hermione would be fooled by Seal's fallacies, but after a long time, Hermione realized that it was just an excuse for Seal to be lazy. Otherwise, Why did Seal work so hard on his favorite transfiguration that even his extracurricular books were historical? After confirming that men are big pig's hooves, and Seal is the big pig's hoof among the big pig's hoofs, Hermione is too lazy to care. After all, strictly speaking, the element that Seal has mastered is that many of the classmates around him will never think about it in this lifetime. Something to master. As for Shire's classmates, they didn't even bother to listen to the class. After a day of silence, intense enthusiasm broke out early this morning, and everyone was discussing the invasion of Sirius the day before yesterday. But this thing is like a hot spot on Weibo, and the update speed is too fast. After Snape finished his class contentedly, Professor Lupin returned to his post the next day and completely rejected Snape's assignment. This gave all the little wizards a new level of affection for Lupin, and soon things about Blake were like a disappearing Weibo hotspot, covered up by subsequent courses and gossip, and disappeared without a trace. Of course, the first of these hot spots must be the Quidditch match. To be honest, Shire is not interested in these things. In Shire's opinion, Quidditch is not as interesting as watching ice hockey. If you are lucky, you can watch a real man 1v1 battle for free, which is no better than Quidditch. More expected. However, the friends around him have been discussing too much, and even Charles, who doesn't understand football at all these days, has learned a lot of strange Quidditch rules from the discussions of these friends. Of course, the worst thing is our Harry, because the time of the Quidditch game is approaching. Wood starts to train like crazy. I don't even know where I got a lot of energy potions, and the result is that whether it's windy or rainy, or the sun is shining, Gryffindor's red scarf is always floating on the Quidditch pitch. This made Harry pray all the time, hoping that it would be a sunny day during the game, and the three of Seal who listened could only helplessly pat Harry on the shoulder to show comfort. After all, magic is magical, but for some reason, these wizards can't predict the weather at all, and even the weather forecast in the wizarding world is on the Muggle side. As for Hogwarts, don't even think about it, it's all about opening the blind box. Except for newspaper subscriptions. Time passed slowly on such a dull day, and Seal soon stopped worrying about some things about Ravenclaw. After all, there was still time, and the ship would naturally go straight to the bridge. Soon some information and ordering of this Quidditch match were posted in the auditorium. Wood was very lucky this time. He did not draw Slytherin, but Hufflepuff, which was slightly weaker than them. Wood was proud of this for a long time. After all, in Hufflepuff, as long as Cedric, the school's grassroots, was nailed to death, nothing else would be a problem. Soon the time for the game will come. Unfortunately, Harry's prayers didn't seem to have any effect, and there was even a hint of poisonous milk in it. From the morning, the entire Hogwarts began to be shrouded in thick dark clouds, and there was not even much sun to see. Until the game began in the afternoon, the strong wind and heavy rain began to beat everything. But such a storm could not stop the enthusiasm of the students, and everyone still began to gather in twos and threes to the stadium against the storm. The senior students, without exception, went out after adding a magic buff to themselves, in order to ensure that they would not be soaked by the rain. Although the students in the lower grades do not know magic, they still resist the heavy rain with incomparable passion. As for Seal, Seal belongs to the third faction, the unlovable faction. The reason is very simple. Seal didn't want to come, but was pulled by Hermione to come to cheer on Gryffindor. After all, the flaming lion that Seal created that time has become a spectacle of Gryffindor. Since then in the future, although the little lions would invite Seal over every time, they were rejected by Seal every time. In fact, this was just a small reason. The main thing was that Seal really didn't want to go out in this ghostly weather, but unfortunately, Hermione insisted on coming. To say that what annoys Seal the most is that it's obviously all this kind of ghost weather. Why are there still so many people? After he climbed up to the stand reluctantly, Seal looked at the little lions who were discussing fiercely one by one, and expressed that he did not understand this kind of behavior, but thinking of Hermione, Seal sighed helplessly and gritted his teeth. Post a few, not a typo. After adding a few layers of rain and warmth buffs, With the expression of giving up his life, he got into the crowd that looked like canned sardines. Chapter 203-Awaken. It was almost effort for Seal to find Hermione in the frenzied crowd, and Hermione had already been squeezed to the edge of a stand. Seeing Seal waving at Seal very happily, it took a lot of effort for Seal to squeeze into Hermione's side. Unlike Hermione's excitement, Seal looked at the frenzied crowd with some disgust. 200 Woolly Bear Wizards chasing 2000 if England's Quidditch plays against the Woolly Bears Quidditch team. The famous scene of England Wizards playing. Of course, neither the result of the game nor the damned weather would stop because of Seal's complaints and amusing thoughts, and the game started on time at the referee's whistle. At the moment when the referee's whistle blew, the already warm atmosphere around him seemed to have reached a higher level, and the frenetic atmosphere even made Charles feel a little hot in the storm. Silently subtracting a bit of the warm buff, Seal gradually felt a little happy looking at Hermione, who was happy. Looking at Hermione, who was jumping and cheering for Gryffindor, Seal felt that he was a little bit for a while. I understand the joy of this bunch of single-dog little wizards. Although Shire is currently a single dog in name only. Everyone was paying attention to the game in the sky, cheering and cheering constantly. Only Seal kept looking at Hermione, glancing at the classroom stand from time to time. Seal clearly remembered that the game ended with Gryffindor losing, not only as there were a lot of Dementors on the field as before. But all this was peaceful because of Dumbledore's presence, and Seal even thought about whether Dumbledore's Patronus of the Phoenix could completely kill a few Dementors like in countless fan fictions in previous lives. After all, the patron saint of fantastic beasts is currently only possessed by Dumbledore. But Seal soon found out that something was wrong, and he couldn't even care about Hermione next to him. There was no other reason. Seal searched for a long time and couldn't find the silver-white figure in the stands. Not only that, but even the serious figure of Professor McGonagall, Charles, was not found. All of a sudden, Seal was stunned, knowing that according to the original book, Dementors were densely packed into the sky of the Quidditch pitch. If there is no Dumbledore, the only few teachers present and some half-baked students can't deal with those dense Dementors. Seal was a little anxious all of a sudden, grabbed Hermione, who was cheering beside him, and asked loudly in her ear, "Hermione, where did you see the principal and the dean go?" But because of the cheers and the continuous wind, Hermione didn't hear what Seal was saying, and only vaguely heard the words principal and dean. In response, Hermione could only helplessly shrug her shoulders to indicate that she hadn't heard what Seal said. But Seal clearly misunderstood something, thinking that Hermione didn't know where the two were, and a strong sense of crisis immediately climbed into Seal's heart. You must find Dumbledore yourself. Otherwise, the whole school will be in danger. So Seal stood up decisively and wanted to pull Hermione away to find Dumbledore, but Hermione seemed to have misunderstood something, and gestured to Seal to indicate that she was waiting for him here, and told Seal to go and return quickly. After Seal understood Hermione's gesture, he didn't know why he always felt inexplicably aggrieved and ashamed. Damn ghost weather, damn ghost weather. Seal couldn't help scolding in a low voice, scolding again and again, speeding up and starting to squeeze out. After all, there was not much time left for Seal, and the original book did not specify when the photo was taken. The ghost appeared. Just as Seal was halfway through the post, exclamations began to be heard from the crowd, and in an instant, it almost became a large area. When Charles turned his attention to the arena, he was surprised to find that Harry was like an endless leaf falling in the middle of the arena. Before he could think about it, Seal immediately took out his wand and aimed it at Harry, who was falling, and almost shouted a spell, shock absorption and stop speed. Harry immediately began to fall slowly as if being supported by an invisible big hand. Before Harry fell to the ground, when Charles breathed a sigh of relief, there was another exclamation around him, and a girl pointed to the sky in horror and said, "Look." Seal took a quick look, and this look almost made his heart stop. He saw that the sky was densely covered with Dementors, and there were still many Dementors hidden in the clouds. The whole Quidditch pitch is almost like a huge cake, and the Dementors are like dense ants on the cake, which is frightening. When Seal was stunned, the teacher's chair and some seniors immediately released Patronus, but without exception they were ordinary Patronus. That is, the appearance of these patron saints seemed to stimulate the densely packed Dementors in the sky at once, and the Dementors began to slowly press down towards the stadium as if they were dying. The few Patronus only persisted for a while before being drowned in the dark Dementors. Almost at the moment when the Patronus was annihilated by the Dementors, a huge fear instantly enveloped the entire stadium, and the crowd immediately began to chaotic. Seal whispered a national curse, and he didn't even bother to look for Dumbledore. He immediately turned around and wanted to look for Hermione. After all, Seal knew how scary the chaotic crowd was. Just when Seal saw Hermione following the crowd, Hermione seemed to have stepped on the rain or something, slipped her feet, and fell to the bottom of the stand almost uncontrollably. Seal didn't have time to think about it. It could even be said that his body's reaction was faster than his brain, and he turned over almost instantly to grab Hermione. But Seal ignored one point, that is, there was no rescue rope on his body at this time, and Seal only reacted when he hugged the terrified Hermione. But unfortunately, because of the height, the two were not far from the ground. Seal almost subconsciously turned his body upside down and hugged Hermione in his arms, and subconsciously began to pray, "Whoever it is, by whatever means, please don't let the girl in your arms suffer any harm." The moment the words fell, the surrounding time seemed to stop, and when Seal opened his eyes again, Seal found himself in a pure white space. In front of Seal, there were 4 people standing, looking at Seal with a smile. "Look, I'll just say this kid will definitely finish my test." One of them, who looked like an elegant nobleman, said happily to the other 3. "Shut up, Slytherin, it's my student." Another person who looked like a knight looked at the young man who just spoke with a defiant look. Chapter 204-Legacy of the Big Four. The bickering between the two obviously did not delay Shire's confusion, and Shilks knew exactly what had just happened. A moment, Seal was a little anxious. Where is this place? What happened? Where's Hermione? How is Hermione? After hearing Ciel's question, the 4 of them looked at each other and smiled. They looked at Seal with more satisfaction. At this time, Ravenclaw stood up. "Don't worry about Seal, this is your spiritual space, and the flow of time outside is different. No, it should be said that the time outside is almost static compared to here, so you don't have to worry. As for the 4 of us, I think you all know, oh, that stupid bastard who likes to bicker with Slytherin is Gryffindor, it's your first time meeting." Soon as Ravenclaw finished speaking, Gryffindor called out in dissatisfaction, "Hey, Rowena. You can't talk about me like that. This is my student. Save me some face, okay?" The other 3 just glanced at Gryffindor lightly, and then stopped talking, but they couldn't hide the disgust in their eyes. Hearing Ravenclaw's words, Seal breathed a sigh of relief. He felt that a big stone in his heart had temporarily fallen to the ground. He enthusiastically greeted Gryffindor, who met for the first time, and looked around suspiciously. "So, what's the situation now?" Seeing Ciel's doubts, Ravenclaw did not speak, but a Hufflepuff standing behind stood up and spoke. "Child, do you remember what you just thought?" Ciel replied with some doubts, "Protect Hermione." Hufflepuff nodded and continued, "That's right, that's not right. In fact, you were already eligible to come in when you first rose to look for the headmaster to stop the disaster. But Gryffindor said that he wanted to see if you had enough courage to deal with the disaster. When you went to rescue the little girl regardless, there was no reason for everyone present to oppose you." Seal nodded suspiciously, but still didn't understand. He tilted his head and looked at the 4 of them. "So what's going on?" Seeing Ciel's cute look, Slytherin couldn't stand it anymore, and slapped his head fiercely. "Damn, that's why I hate Gryffindor." "Well, Charles, to put it simply, you have passed our test, and the 4 of us agreed that you are qualified to inherit the elemental magic of the 4 of us." Seal was almost fooled by this sudden happiness, but soon Seal calmed down and looked at Ravenclaw who was standing in front of him smiling. "But, I didn't accept Ravenclaw. Ladies' Wind Element Enlightenment." Ravenclaw said to Seal with a slight smile after hearing Ciel's aggrieved words. No, you were actually enlightened when you found me, it's just that your mind was all elsewhere at the time. Just didn't notice it. If it doesn't work, you can look back. Seal looked back in surprise. An earth suddenly appeared behind him. Seal seemed to be able to feel the flames inside the whole earth, the mountains and rivers on the surface, the sea, and the wind that filled the whole earth without looking at it. Even the vaguely Seal could feel a trace of life in his soul constantly laughing. That's the elf of the elements, the elf bred by the soul infused with the elements. When she is born, it means that you have completed all the elemental cultivation, and you can call yourself the mage of the elements. Ravenclaw in the Shire said behind. Seal immersed himself in his soul for a while, and felt this newly born little life. Seal was overjoyed for a while, but Seal suddenly turned around and looked at it as if he had thought of something. But, what about Mr. Slytherin's seal? It's good not to mention this, but when I mention this seal, I feel full of anger. Ciel's soul. At the end of last semester, Slytherin's rude operation directly made Seal feel that his old problems had been committed again. That was the difference between the current military and the military of World War II. With a bit of resentment in his eyes, Slytherin smiled helplessly. Trust me, Seal, this is definitely for your own good, not to mention that you have already unsealed it. Seal curled his lips in disdain, but did not refute Slytherin's words. On the contrary, Gryffindor, who was watching the play, said with a smile, he's right, Seal, this unfortunate dead snake is indeed for your own good. One thing to know about Seal, the fire element is different from other elements. To a large extent, the color of the flame can directly reflect the user's inner situation. As you know, the child named Grindelwald has firm ideals, unyielding beliefs, and can even imprison himself for decades for his beliefs, so her flame is clean and pure light blue. Contrary to your teacher, that child is full of remorse, but full of love and passion, so her flame is orange. But the flame before you was blood red. Generally speaking, this flame represents rejection, revenge, and a lack of security, so there is a reason for Slytherin to seal your element. He is afraid that you will go astray. After all, if an elemental magician goes astray, the wizards now have no other way than to use life to fill you up. As soon as Gryffindor finished speaking, Seal still curled his lips in dissatisfaction. I understand the truth, but this thing is too fucking incomprehensible to look at the two of them, as if speaking, continue your sophistry. It was a little embarrassing to see the two of them, but the good old Hufflepuff stood up. Trust them, little Seal, Slytherin's seal is not a seal at all, the magic he gave you is called a spiritual stamp, and the principle is show blocks something until a certain condition is met. In our day, this kind of magic is often used to train young knights, and the conditions set by Slytherin are simple: protect Hogwarts, and stick to your goodness. Shar heard some doubts about life, that's all. What the fuck? I was afraid of repeatedly tossing and turning for such a small goal. For a time, Seal felt that he was very much like the stupid dog from the second fool's house in the next village, and he was so ashamed that he could pull out a large villa with 3 or 4 floors. Seal took a deep breath, relieved his embarrassment, looked at the 4 people standing in front of him, and asked the question just now, okay, what's the situation now? Chapter 205 _ Blessings from the Big Four. Seal, are you sure you don't want to know anything else? Gryffindor seemed not satisfied that Seal just wanted to end the conversation with Seal, and asked with some doubts. Seal looked at the puzzled Gryffindor, shook his head and continued, no, I still have a lot of questions, such as prophecies, why only I can obtain the inheritance completely, such as your current state, and even lots of questions about Ms. Ravenclaw. But I don't think you guys will tell me the things I want to know the most, not to mention that I'm still in free fall in reality. Although the time here is theoretically infinite, I still hope that the limited time can be guaranteed. Me and Hermione's safety. After listening to Ciel's thoughts, the 4 of them looked at each other with a satisfied look in their eyes. After all, they care about the lives of their comrades and their most important thing. It's called trash, but people who abandon their mates are not even trash. Hey, I know, it's your little girlfriend. To be honest, it's too weak. You should find a female knight. Gryffindor said with a wink at Seal. Seal looked helplessly at the funny Gryffindor, and kept complaining that his style of painting was different from the other three. Slytherin looked at his good friend with a helpless and doting, mentally retarded, look on his face. Seal saw it very clearly. Slytherin opened his mouth several times and wanted to complain, but in the end he was held back and finally turned into a helpless sigh. Little Seal, don't mind, Gryffindor's brain circuits are always so strange. After comforting Seal as if to comfort himself, Slytherin walked up to Seal and put his hand on Seal's head. I'm sorry for the trouble you have caused. Seal, forgive my willfulness, may you be able to move forward firmly towards your goal. Quote. After speaking, Slytherin's figure disappeared into Seal's spiritual world as a silver-white light. The remaining three looked at each other, and Hufflepuff stood up. This slightly chubby, kind lady came to Seal and put her hand on Seal's head like a Slytherin. Superior. May you always be kind and upright, which are the best qualities of human beings. After speaking, Hufflepuff also turned into a khaki light and disappeared into Seal's spiritual world. Gryffindor came to Seal, and suddenly pulled out the long sword from his waist, like an ancient canonized knight, and tapped Seal's left and right shoulders with the sword. I give you courage, remember, in the face of anything, you must keep the brave heart that can draw out your sword and fight the enemy at any time. After finishing speaking, Gryffindor's figure also turned into a red light and disappeared into Seal's spiritual world, leaving only Ravenclaw. Ravenclaw slowly came to Seal and looked at Seal. Don't worry about Gryffindor, he is a knight fanatic, so you know the style of painting. After speaking, he did not forget to make a naughty face. Seal was a little surprised for a while. After all, the Ravenclaw in the impression would not be such a girl. Ravenclaw didn't care about Seal's surprise and continued to say to Seal, I know you have a lot of questions, but I'm sorry, we can't answer you here, maybe you can find time to ask me. After speaking, without waiting for Seal to agree, he stood with his hands in front of Seal and said to Seal, may you always have a curious mind about all things in the world, and the wind will take you to higher heights. Ravenclaw's voice just fell, and the dazzling blue light appeared in Seal's eyes in an instant, and Seal closed his eyes suddenly stimulated by the blue light. But the moment Seal closed his eyes, Seal felt that there were a lot of records about the wind element in his mind, and even many of them were only on paper. Seal couldn't help but sighed in his heart that he was indeed Ravenclaw, and her research on the element of wind was almost the pinnacle of her. When Seal opened his eyes again, he was already back in the real world. Seal looked at the world around him in amazement as if time stood still, and slowly began to move little by little. Even Seal could see the shape of the raindrops around him and the water droplets that were gradually leaving his body under the influence of gravity. After a while, the movement of the surrounding objects began to get faster and faster, and Seal used the wind element almost subconsciously without thinking much. The power of the wind appeared invisible under Seal, and all of a sudden supported the two who were falling. Hermione was extremely surprised, and it was only a short moment from her distress to being rescued by Seal. The wind element slowly placed Seal and Hermione on the ground in a very gentle way. Hermione looked at Seal beside her in shock. Charles, you. Seal shook his head and signaled Hermione to calm down, but he looked up at the Dementor that filled the sky. His eyes became colder and colder. For some reason, Seal really hated these dark creatures at this time. The Ministry of Magic can't take care of you. Then I'll take care of you. Hogwarts is not the place for dark creatures like you to come. Shire seemed to be whispering, as if to find some reasons for himself. Muttered loudly. As Seal's voice fell, the originally irregular wind began to gather in front of Seal as if it had received an order. After a while, a huge giant appeared in front of Seal. Tornado. The huge tornado was like a giant dragon, constantly swaying in the sky, but wherever the tornado approached, countless Dementors were swept into the huge wind column by the tornado of Char. In just a short while, most of the Dementors in the sky were swept in by a huge tornado. The rest of the Dementors scattered in a hurry and began to flee towards the periphery of the campus. Seal didn't care about those Dementors that escaped. After all, this thing belongs to the Ministry of Magic in name, and it's okay to kill some of them. If it is really wiped out, Seal estimates that Old Dang will be embarrassed by the Ministry of Magic and cry to death. After all, our Absfudge is still the Minister of Magic, and Seal feels that there is no need to tear up his face with this man now. After all, the serious matter still needs to be solved by fooling him, and tearing up his face now is not good. Thinking of this, Seal no longer hesitated, raised his hand, and the golden flame seemed to come alive, but within a short while, it spread throughout the tornado. From a distance, it looks like a giant dragon made of gold is dancing on the Quidditch pitch at Hogwarts, but this golden dragon is full of danger. Chapter 206-Harry who was fooled and lame. When Harry woke up again, it was already a hospital. Harry looked around in a daze. There were not many people in the empty hospital. Our Madame Pomfrey had already turned the noisy group away. The noisy students were driven out. Only a few people who were seriously injured due to the early panic of the Dementor's appearance were left lying in the hospital in 2s and 3s. After Harry looked around, he finally found his acquaintance beside him, Seal. At this time, Sha'ur's eyes were covered with bandages, and he was lying on the bed with a hopeless expression, as if he had been played badly. Harry greeted cautiously, "Hi, Charles, what happened?" Seal, who guided Harry to say hello, seemed to have discovered his relatives, not to say that he had finally found something interesting, and instantly put away his unlovable face. Answered Harry in a very serious tone, "Hello Harry, it's nothing, the Dementor dug out my eye, it's okay, Madame Pomfrey said it can be cured, don't worry." "What?" Harry exclaimed after hearing what happened to Seal, and even got up from the bed, but aren't Dementors the most favorite thing to absorb people's souls and happiness? Why gouge out your eyes? And what the hell happened after I was in a coma? Seeing Harry put on the condom, Charles became very playful for a while, turned around and looked at Harry. The gauze-covered eyes really made people feel that there was nothing under the gauze, only empty eye sockets. "It's a long story, are you ready Harry?" Charles said in a low voice, like he was about to tell a ghost story. Harry swallowed hard, looked at Seal and nodded, and hummed in a lack of confidence. Hearing Harry's figure, Seal almost burst into laughter at this moment, but he was still very serious on the surface, and he said to Harry with a low voice and a little sadness, "After you fell unconscious, I found you and used magic to catch you, but with your fall, countless Dementors appeared in the sky." The dense sky covered the sun, and a sense of despair shrouded everyone in an instant. Although many people used Patronus, it was helpless that there were too many Dementors. When Seal said this, he paused in line with the atmosphere, and then Seal heard Harry's nervous swallowing voice. Seal tried his best to control his desire to laugh, and then continued with a low figure. "The dark Dementors covered almost the entire stadium, and the crowd panicked for a while, and I controlled my magic in the crowd to make sure you could land safely. But it happened unexpectedly. Dementors may not be content to gather on the square to absorb happy emotions at this time, they are eager for fresh souls. As a result, the Dementors began to descend throughout the film, trying to absorb the souls of the students, and it was at this time that a Dementor found me. Seeing that I was doing magic, the Dementor seemed very interested in me. He didn't want to suck my soul out right away, he seemed to want more of my fear. So he stretched out his long dry claws and ripped my eyes off a little bit. Fortunately, you have landed safely, otherwise we might all be in danger." After hearing Seal's words, Harry's guilt suddenly poured out uncontrollably, and it seemed that Seal lost his eyes because of his own reasons. "I'm sorry, Charles, I really can't imagine how you endured that pain. I'm really sorry. If you need anything, just tell me, and I'll give you all I can to help you get back to health." Harry almost retracted his head into his abdomen with guilt, and suddenly Harry looked at Seal anxiously, as if thinking of something. "Seal, where are the others? Where's Ron? Where's Min?" Seal listened to Harry's anxious voice, and in his heart, he was about to laugh out of his breath. Suddenly, there was a feeling that the girls and boys who were not recruited in the previous life needed to change their eggs, and he was much younger than himself. The feeling of the children during the 1999 war. Seal suppressed his smile and wanted to play with a big one. After all, such a foolish Harry might really not have this shop after passing this village. So Charles continued in a sad tone, "I'm sorry, Harry, I'm really sorry, Ron and Hermione. I am sorry, Harry, you're seeing almost all the survivors now." Hearing Ciel's words, Harry felt as if his bones had been taken away for a moment, and lay on the bed all of a sudden, as if he was constantly blaming himself and feeling sad. Ciel didn't know it, because Ciel couldn't see it. But Ciel turned his back to Harry, and he couldn't help laughing secretly. Harry looked at Ciel's shaking shoulders and thought that Ciel was crying. The blame is even greater. Charles, right. Before Harry could finish his words, the door of the school hospital was suddenly pushed open, and Hermione and Ron walked in noisily with a large bag of food. Seeing Hermione and Ron, Harry was simply surprised and delighted, and immediately shouted, "Hermione, Ron. You are not dead. Great." Of course, accompanied by Harry's shouting, there was also a laugh that Ciel couldn't hold back any longer. The two who had just walked in were confused by Ciel's exaggerated laughter and Harry's almost tearful expression, completely ignorant of what was going on. After knowing the whole story, Harry got Ron's laughing pig's voice and Hermione's big white eyes, and such a poor lie that you can believe. After Ron had laughed enough, he took out a short bare broom handle and said to Harry, "I'm sorry, Harry, your broom was like this when I found it." Harry didn't care at all, and waved his hands with a smile to indicate that you were all right, and the broom or something was not important. Harry, who had calmed down for a while, then thought of his game and Ciel, who was just beside him, and began to ask about the game and Ciel. After hearing Harry's question, Hermione rolled her eyes and answered Harry's question, "Don't think about it, Gryffindor lost the game, as for Ciel." The three of them looked at Ciel who was eating and drinking, but Ciel didn't know it at all, and continued to show off the food in his mouth. Hermione shook her head helplessly and continued, "Most of the Dementors were killed by Ciel, but Ciel's eyes also changed. Madame Pomfrey checked it carefully and found no problem, but to be on the safe side, tell Charles to stay in the school hospital honestly and wait for Headmaster Dumbledore and Professor McGonagall to come back and check before talking." Quote. Chapter 207 Shire's nickname. Because of Ciel's deceit, after Harry experienced great grief in a short period of time, he didn't seem so sad when he faced the loss of the first gift in his life. It's just that in the days that followed, Harry looked at Ciel with resentful eyes. Although Ciel couldn't see it, he could feel Harry's resentful eyes. In the end, Ciel couldn't stand Harry's resentment and promised to help Harry to do one thing. Harry was also completely determined to learn the Patronus charm because of this incident and Ciel's flickering. After all, in Harry's opinion, if he didn't have the means to suppress the Dementors, maybe one day in the future, the scene that Ciel was joking might actually appear. Harry beat him to death and didn't want the scene that Ciel described to become a reality, but unfortunately, even Ciel's Patronus charm was at the level of half a bottle of vinegar, and Ciel only thought that he was definitely not a good teacher. Therefore, Charles reluctantly rejected Harry's request to follow him to learn the Patronus charm, and instead gave Harry an opinion to go to Professor Lupin to learn. With the relationship between Harry's parents and Professor Lupin, he will definitely teach Harry about the Patronus charm. The most important thing is that Professor Lupin can indeed release a complete Patronus, which is obviously more important than anything else. Harry also accepted Shire's advice and decided to leave the hospital to study with Professor Lupin. Harry's wish came true very quickly. The reason was very simple. Harry, who was basically uninjured, was released by Madame Pomfrey the next day. In the hospital, only Charles was left alone and bored in the hospital. Lie down. Fortunately, Ciel's boredom didn't last long. The day after Harry left the hospital, Dumbledore hurried back with Professor McGonagall. When Ciel heard Dumbledore's voice appearing in the school hospital, he felt as if he heard the holy voice for a while. No matter whether the result was good or bad, Seal finally didn't have to continue to lie in bed bored. If not to mention that Dumbledore is the headmaster, he is well informed. After knowing the specific situation of Seal, he just gave Seal a symbolic look, and he was sure to announce Seal to everyone. There was no problem at all, and he took Seal directly out of the school hospital to the principal's office. After arriving in the headmaster's room, Dumbledore sat wearily in his chair, looking at Seal's eyes that had changed to the color of gold. He still managed to squeeze out a happy expression. "Congratulations, Seal, you have completely walked ahead of everyone, and the first true elemental mage has been born in 1,000 years. Seal looked at the tired old dang, curled his lips, and said, "Okay, teacher, don't make up those falsehoods. What happened to make you and Professor McGonagall not at school? Know that you shouldn't leave school at this time in my prediction." Dumbledore gave a wry smile when he heard Seal's words, and then replied, "I'm sorry, Seal, but this has obviously exceeded my expectations. I don't know who spread the news that you were sealed by Slytherin, and all the pure-blood families united to put pressure on Hogwarts for a while. Grindelwald also knew about this matter. According to his investigation, it was obvious that there were the shadows of the goblins behind this incident. In the end, even the Ministry of Magic got involved and wanted to share in the pie." Hearing this, Charles couldn't close his mouth in surprise. What do those goblins want to do? I can understand the Ministry of Magic. After all, Fudge regards you as a thorn in the eye, and it's not a day or two to take Hogwarts from you. Holy shit, but those goblins. There's no real benefit for them to get Hogwarts. Seal couldn't figure it out for a while, and even if you fail, wouldn't those purebloods be stupid enough to let those goblins settle into Hogwarts and become teachers or headmasters? After hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore rubbed his temples with a headache, and thought for a while before answering Seal's question. It shouldn't be like this. Purebloods want to completely master Hogwarts. It means the ownership of knowledge can be completely mastered, and stupid people are always better in control than smart people. Fundamentally, those goblins seem to have the same purpose as pureblood, but speaking of which, they seem to be more afraid of the appearance of the second me this time." After Dumbledore finished speaking, he looked at Seal playfully, as if he wanted to see how Seal reacted. Seal was confused. "Me? The second you? Not to mention that I'm only in the 3rd grade and have been sealed with elements. Are there any holes in these pure-blooded heads? Then again, why can I still use elements when they don't jump out?" Seeing Seal's doubts about life, Dumbledore smiled. "No, it's not because they don't dance. It's because they don't dare. As long as they are pure-bloods whose family inheritance is not broken, they all know the power of an elemental mage. How big will it be? What's more, you're still too young. No one knows what will happen to you in the future, so they dare not." But since the news that you were sealed came out, those people started to be enthusiastic. After all, the magical talent you showed after you was sealed was stronger than mine at that time. So they started to worry. Just like that sentence, people who are close will only have jealousy and fear, and only by opening a huge gap, jealousy and fear will become admiration and admiration. But there is one thing I really didn't expect. In order to force me to hand over Hogwarts, they let or even encourage Dementors to enter the school. You must know that many of the children present were pure-blooded children." After he finished speaking, Seal could almost see Dumbledore's anger. Those beautiful light blue eyes suddenly became extremely dangerous, and even the fire element in the air began to be restless. After a long time, Dumbledore calmed down and said to Seal with a smile, "I knew at the time that I was going to leave Professor McGonagall alone and come back to save the scene. Fortunately, you lifted the seal at that time. Punched them in the face. Especially when some of the records from the scene were sent back. Some very old pureblood families almost turned their backs on the spot after knowing that your eyes had turned golden." He turned the blade towards his former teammates without mercy, and because of this, Professor McGonagall and I were able to escape and return, and Hogwarts did not fall into the hands of the goblins. Shatter listened in a fog, looking at his teacher with some doubts. Why do they know that I have completed the awakening of the 4 elements? Obviously many people don't know about this. Dumbledore just shook his head lightly, and then said, "Don't underestimate those ancient families, their knowledge reserves even exceed your imagination." "Oh, yes, they even gave you a nickname, do you want to know?" Dumbledore looked at Seal with teasing eyes as if he had remembered something funny, and successfully aroused Seal's curiosity. "What?" Charles looked at his teacher expectantly. "The Monarch." Chapter 208-Dead Char. After hearing his nickname, Seal really had a black line on his forehead. Is this kind of thing common in the world? If nothing else, the patriarchs of these pure-blooded families should have passed the age of middle school too, right? Dumbledore laughed even more happily when he looked at Seal with an expression I didn't want to admit. These people were all fools, what's the matter? Don't you want to express your thoughts? My monarch. Hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal felt a pain in his heart. Forgive me, teacher, what bastard came up with such a shameful nickname? Why isn't he called the Führer? Gone. Hearing Seal's complaints, Dumbledore couldn't hold back and laughed happily. After a while, Dumbledore stopped his laughter, looked at Seal, and tried to bring the topic to the right track. Superior. Okay, don't care about their thoughts. After all, according to their thoughts, you should inherit my mantle and then win them over with great strides, then overthrow the existing Ministry of Magic and become the new Minister of Magic. Their nickname is also a sign of kindness towards you, so don't worry about that. After comforting the depressed Seal, Dumbledore thought for a while and then continued, also, we don't have much time. Because of the lifting of your seal, they have now dared not act rashly, so they will again subdued and waited for the moment. It is because of this that we have time to complete our layout. Shire, you have to speed up the completion of my test. When you are done, I will tell you all the plans. Seal nodded helplessly after hearing Dumbledore's words. I've been a little stressed by hearing the word test recently. After complaining helplessly, Seal stood up and wanted to leave. After all, Hermione was still waiting for him in the dormitory or classroom, so she should report safety no matter what. Just as he was about to open the door of the headmaster's room, Dumbledore's voice came from behind again. Charles, pay attention, although these purebloods are immersed again, they will definitely keep testing this time. Your attitude, after all, you are the first person to complete the awakening of the 4 elements in 1,000 years. This achievement has even surpassed mine. If you were not too young and still studying at Hogwarts, the door of your house should have been broken through by the wizards who came to congratulate you. Don't be immersed in their flattery, be sure to clearly see their intentions. After hearing Dumbledore's instructions, Seal nodded, suddenly as if remembering something, turned around and looked at Dumbledore anxiously. Teacher, my parents. Hearing Seal's words, Dumbledore smiled and waved his hand to Seal and said, Don't worry, Professor McGonagall and I have cast a protective spell on you and Hermione's parents a long time ago. Melon, no one can find them, not even me. After hearing Dumbledore's assurance, Charles breathed a sigh of relief and bowed to Dumbledore very formally. Thank you, teacher. Seeing Seal's appearance, Dumbledore waved his hand indifferently. Okay, let's go find your friends. I think they should have got the news too, they should be in a hurry now. After hearing Dumbledore's words, Seal withdrew in peace and went to find Hermione happily. Dumbledore sat alone in the empty headmaster's room, watching the door that Charles had just left unclosed, and after a while it seemed like he was talking to himself. Come on, Charles, as a teacher, I can only help you so much. Naturally, Seal couldn't know what Dumbledore was saying while sitting alone in the headmaster's room. At this time, Seal returned to Gryffindor's lounge full of joy. As soon as he entered the door, a loud cheering sound came out. The loudness of the sound startled Seal and even made Seal feel a little tinnitus. After a while, Seal regained his hearing. But before Seal could react, Seal was surrounded by a frenzied crowd, and then he was lifted up and thrown into the sky constantly. While throwing back the words that seemed to be incomparable in the Seal, shouting the King of Gryffindor and the like. Seal was thrown like a mascot for a while with such a confused look on his face. After he was finally put down, countless classmates gathered around him. Some wanted to apprentice, some to sign, and even several wild ladies wanted to borrow. This wave of confounding operations frightened Seal to be a ghost, and it was difficult for him to escape from the Gryffindor lounge with the help of Harry, Hermione and Ron in a daze. It wasn't until he ran to Myrtle's abandoned bathroom that Seal didn't have time to pant and ask what happened to the three present. He was in the school hospital for 2 days, how could he feel like he was disconnected from the internet? So, in Hermione's eyes, the three of you started talking about what happened. It's very simple. Although Gryffindor lost the game because of the accident on the Quidditch field, Shire, who is Gryffindor, saved many people on the field. Even because the Golden Flame is too much in line with the image of Gryffindor, I don't know who or when it started, and some people began to say that Seal was a little wizard who was recognized by Gryffindor himself. Gradually, this matter became more and more evil, and finally it became that Seal was the king of the entire Gryffindor, and completely inherited everything in Gryffindor. Seal's full name turned out to be Seal Gryffindor Lancaster or something. But unfortunately, it was true that Seal saved most of the little wizards on the Quidditch pitch, and the Golden Flame tornado was true, and even the fire did burn out a lot of Dementors. In this way, true and false news spread, and Seal's nicknames became more and more, such as the Dementor Killer, the true successor of Gryffindor, the Great Demon Lord of Flame and the like. In the end, it was Wood who had a clear mind. I don't know if it was to cover up the grief and anger of Gryffindor losing a goal at the beginning of this year or to cheer for the Gryffindors. He even contacted a small group of people to unite. The title is called The King of Gryffindor. This trick is really good. The little lions have completely forgotten about Gryffindor's loss, and instead began to proudly boast that their academy has a king, named Charles Gryffindor Lancaster. He was his best friend or something. In just 2 days, almost the entire Hogwarts knew about this matter, and not even the Slytherin gang objected. After Seal knew the whole story again, there was nothing else for a while, but he felt a mixture of grief and anger. He had clearly destroyed the Dementor, so why did he do this to me? Seal, who feels that he has completely died, his biggest dream at this time is to travel in place and live in a different world. What is the King of Gryffindor? This title is simply shame. He also brought his classmates, family as a guest. Chapter 209-Harry who sneaked out. Fortunately, Shire's social death ended very quickly. The school is like this, and there are new things every day to enrich the interests of this group of little wizards without the internet. Not long after, because of the restart of the Quidditch match, Seal was suddenly squeezed out of the hot search, and Seal was finally relieved that he no longer lived by the illusion. After all, no one can bear to walk on the road well, and the oncoming person suddenly showed a surprised expression, and then shouted the King of Gryffindor with a smile, and then bowed to himself crookedly, although it was true there is a small percentage of Slytherins who are sincere. But this situation still made Seal feel the embarrassment when Harry participated in the Goblet of Fire in the book. Fortunately, Seal was full of magic, and after only 1 day, he began to rely on the disillusionment curse to survive. Of course, it wasn't just Seal who was happy, but also his friends. With Hermione at the head, they were so excited that they almost cried. After all, after Seal was invisible, no one knew whether Seal was still there or not. In the eyes of outsiders, talking to a cloud of air will only kill you. As for new hot searches such as Quidditch matches, Seal said he didn't care. After all, Seal went to the arena twice, and Harry was in danger both times. According to Seal, he was born with a broom, especially Harry's broom. Time passed by in a hurry, the days were soon approaching the 12th lunar month, and Christmas was about to be celebrated next time. Seal was busy getting familiar with his newly acquired elements recently. In addition to taking classes, he was busy with his feet not touching the ground every day. For a moment he forgot to prepare a present and visit Ravenclaw again at the Room of Requirement. Soon, it was the school's traditional Hogwarts day, and all the little wizards were gearing up to make a big purchase. After all, it was almost Christmas, and everyone had to prepare gifts. Seal is no exception. This time, he has decided to buy more strange candies as gifts for the 2 adults in his family, especially the 2 fathers. It seems that he is very interested in the strange candies in the magical world. Interest. Even Mr. Granger, who is a dentist, has completely given up his ethics as a dentist. Since last year, he has started to play Russian roulette with Strange Beans and Shire's father, Mr. William. According to the description of the person involved, it is very exciting. After all, there is nothing more interesting than watching your friend put on a mask of pain after eating a strange taste. On the day of Hogsmeade, Seal still took Hermione to play happily in the town. Hermione took the initiative and started shopping with Seal, but fortunately, Seal brought his own magical little box very wisely. The whole town and castle were shrouded in heavy snow, and the Christmas atmosphere began to gradually become stronger, and the shops on the street began to be lit up. I don't know if it was because the char burned a lot of Dementors last time, or if Christmas is coming, the whole Hogsmeade looks a lot happier than last time. Seal was also happy to participate. After all, who wouldn't like such a happy atmosphere? Sherway didn't want anyone to disturb her and Hermione's solitude, and specially arranged for a girl named Radwin to take Ron away, but Ron seemed to be immersed in it when he saw it in Shire. After the two of them made a big purchase, Hermione actually proposed to go to the legendary haunted house to see it. This one was shocked by Charles, who knew that Sirius was still inside. And what Shire has never understood is that there are a lot of ghosts in Hogwarts, and everyone is not afraid, even talking and laughing with these ghosts. Why it is the Screaming Shack's turn to start to be afraid. What the hell? Under the powerful logic of Seal, Hermione successfully broke the defense, but at the same time, it also aroused Hermione's interest, and she pulled Seal to find out. Although Seal is reluctant in every possible way, the helpless thing is that the right to choose is not with Seal. The two of them had just approached this famous haunted house when Shire and Hermione heard a voice mocking someone with a sarcastic tone. It wasn't until the two walked in that they saw that Ron and Radwin were also here, and even Malfoy was here with his two followers. The mocking sound just now was Malfoy mocking Ron. But Malfoy was obviously in trouble, because at this time Radwin was just like an old hen protecting his chickens, keeping Ron behind him and spraying Mal. Seeing such a scene made Shargan very funny. Does it count as a matter for him to promote a pair of marriages in advance? But before Seal was addicted to it, Hermione anxiously wanted to pull Seal over to clear the siege. After all, Ron was a friend of the two of them, and those who stood by and watched were not in Hermione's dictionary at all. But before the two could rush up, a huge snowball hit Malfoy, and then the three of Malfoy seemed to be smitten, and Crabbe's pants were pulled off. Goyle was carried in a scarf and started spinning in circles. This sudden change scared our Malfoy. Just as he was about to run, he felt like he was hit in the face with a fist. Before Malfoy, who was lying on the ground, could get up, something began to drag Malfoy towards the Screaming Shack. Thinking of the various legends about the Screaming Shack, Malfoy was terrified all of a sudden, and he tore off his shoes under the frantic struggle. Malfoy couldn't care about his shoes, and stumbled and pulled Crabbe, screaming and fleeing with Goyle. This kind of scene made everyone laugh at once, and Seal laughed the most. After all, Seal knew that Harry must have done it. In fact, smart people can guess it by looking at the footprints on the ground. Hermione understood after thinking for a while, and looked around angrily. Harry, you shouldn't sneak out, it's very dangerous, you know. Hermione's voice just fell, and before Harry showed up, Ron on the side was solidly relieved. Strictly speaking, Malfoy's tragic situation just stimulated not only the three of Malfoy, but also Luo Yep. Hearing Hermione's accusation, Harry put down the idea of trying to prank Seal, and reluctantly lifted the invisibility cloak. I know, but I'm too boring. Don't worry, no one will pay attention to me. After speaking, he didn't forget to shake the invisibility cloak in his hand. Seeing Harry's actions as if he was showing off his wealth, Seal gave up his urge to help the poor boy Harry, and made a helpless gesture in Hermione's serious eyes. Fortunately, Harry finally persuaded Hermione, and the five decided to drink a cup of butterbeer to warm up together, and then Harry followed Seal and Hermione back to the castle. After all, Seal was the most powerful at the scene. Seal was quite critical of this, and he never expected to kick Ron away, and Harry came again. It really means that the light was always on. Chapter 210-Another Dumbledore. Harry walked with Seal in his cloak, discussing everything about Black and everything about Marauder's map as they walked. Especially Ron, after he learned that the twins have the artifact of the Marauder's map, he has already started to scold. After all, the twins never told Ron this secret. Ron even began to wonder if he was the twins' younger brother. This rant made Seal laugh even more happily, but soon, several people had a disagreement on where to go for a drink. Seal wanted to go to the Hog's Head bar. After all, there was another Dumbledore there, and Hermione obviously did the research and was firmly opposed to going to the dirty place like the Hog's Head bar. The last few people decided to use a democratic vote to resolve it, and unsurprisingly, only Charles was interested in the Hog's Head bar. Hermione looked at Seal with a triumphant look on her face. The meaning was obvious: tell Seal to accept his fate. In desperation, Seal could only keep winking at Hermione to indicate that he really had something to do at the Pig's Head bar, but it was obvious that he couldn't tell Harry and Ron about it. In the end, under Hermione's suspicious gaze, Seal left an element mark on Harry before he escaped. This element mark could stimulate the surrounding fire element when Harry was in danger. Nothing else has any effect. After all, Seal knows that the only thing that can cause harm to Harry this semester is only the Dementors. As for Sirius, the baby can harm Harry before it's too late. So Charles parted under Ron's obsessive gaze of the three broomstick bar owners. On the way, Charles even saw Fudge, the Minister of Magic, but Fudge didn't seem to see Charles. Seal ignored Fudge and quietly slipped past Fudge, but Hagrid, who was beside Fudge, found Seal, but seeing that Seal looked like no one knew me, Hagrid could probably guess. Guessing that Charles was too lazy to pull the limit with Fudge, he didn't say hello to him. Seeing that he had gone so far, Fudge didn't find himself. Charles was leisurely, whistling and stepping on the snow happily to the Pig's Head bar, and even had the intention to look at the scenery. I have to say, Hogsmeade also well, even Hogwarts, as long as the buildings in the wizarding world are accompanied by white snow, there is an indescribable taste. Anyway, Charles was very happy. It was until the entrance of the Pig's Head bar that Charles felt inexplicably a little cowardly. He didn't know anything else, but according to Aberforth seeing Dumbledore and even using black magic, it can be seen that the two brothers' relationship is definitely not a good one. With an uneasy mood, Seal slowly opened the door of the bar. The door made a sour creaking sound, and as the door opened, Seal walked in slowly. There was no one in the bar at this time, and the entire bar was still dark and dirty under the light outside. Charles even saw a few tables with leftover wine glasses from the guests and some unknown ones. Mixture on the table. The whole bar smelled like it fell into a pile of smelly socks that haven't been washed in years. Damn, can't it be ventilated? Seal complained helplessly, pinching his nose. It's not up to you. Hurry up and get out of here, this is not the place where students should come. A vigorous male voice came slowly from behind the bar. Accompanied by the sound of footsteps, a fat man with a gray beard and a gray beard that was 7 points similar to Dumbledore walked out slowly from the passage behind the bar. After seeing Shire, who was a little nervous, he continued, who am I supposed to be? It turned out to be an immortal apprentice. What? Are you here to be a lobbyist or to apologize for him? Seeing Aberforth's disgusting expression, Seal was also a little overwhelmed for a while, and without thinking, he blurted out, I'm here to see you, I'm afraid you and I will fight for inheritance. Hearing Ciel's words, Aberforth was stunned for a moment, and after a while, he patted his stomach and laughed loudly, ha, good boy, I'm starting to like you. Charles shrugged his shoulders, walked to the bar with a nonchalant face and sat down. Have a drink, anything is fine, as long as it's not butterbeer. Seeing that Seal behaved like an adult, Aberforth said nothing, went to the counter and grabbed a glass, and gave Seal a large glass of fire whiskey. Seal looked at the fingerprints on the cup with some disgust. After hesitating for a long time, he still took out his wand and mobilized the water element to give the cup a thorough cleaning. After that, he did not forget to add a new one. This song obviously made Aberforth stunned for a moment. After Seal cleaned the cup, he took the initiative to refill Seal with wine. The outside world is saying that you have the power of the elements. It seems that the rumor is true. That old bone really accepted a good disciple. Sha'ur didn't care either. She picked up the wine glass and pretended to lick the wine in the glass, but didn't dare to drink too much. After all, Sha'ur didn't like this thing, so what kind of fun Sha'ur would rather drink more juice? Seeing where Charles was pretending to be unhurried at this time, he clearly took a sip, but the wine in the glass still did not decrease. Aberforth frowned. "Boy, I'm starting to hate you again," saying, "Well, what do you have to do with me? Stop pretending." Hearing Aberforth's words, Seal put down his glass slowly, and replied to Aberforth, who looked at him with disgust, "It's nothing, I just want to ask you for a little favor." Hearing Seal's request, Aberforth's eyes stared like light bulbs. "Me? Help? Are you looking for me? Is there anything else that my great brother can't solve?" Hearing Aberforth's words, Seal frowned indistinctly. After speaking for a while, he sighed and answered Aberforth's words. "It's true, I can't let him know about what I want to do, so I came to find you, and I'm not afraid that you will be unhappy. In fact, you're only an option in this matter, but I'm afraid it will take a long time to choose another candidate. It took me a long time to complete my commission, and it just so happened that I didn't want to delay any longer, so I found you." Quote. Seeing Ciel's confident look, the mockery on Aberforth's face became even more serious. "Doing things behind my goddamn brother's back. I like this, but why should I help you?" Seal looked at the stubborn Aberforth, and didn't intend to talk too much. He drank the wine in his glass in one breath, and then jumped off the bar to the door, and then paused. "Because this is about the life and death of your damn brother, your only relative in this world, think about it carefully, Mr. Aberforth. As for the reward, maybe let you meet Ariana." After speaking, without waiting for Aberforth to react, he pushed open the door of the bar and left. Chapter 211_Prepare Empty Gloves White Wolf. In fact, Seal didn't plan to find Aberforth at all at first. The reason was very simple. Seal didn't know Aberforth's attitude. The original plan was to have Sirius or Snape complete these things. But considering that both Sirius and Snape were his own teachers, it was inevitable to report to Dumbledore. After much deliberation, Seal decided to first come and see if he could speak to Aberforth. Gaunt's ring must not be known to Dumbledore, otherwise, Dumbledore will definitely wear the ring, triggering the curse on the ring, and even if the curse is not completely cleared, Charles does not intend to let his family the teacher knows everything about the Resurrection Stone. This is the best way to avoid Dumbledore's sacrifice in Ciel's mind. Even Ciel suspects that Dumbledore's desire to sacrifice himself in the original may be the result of prolonged exposure to the Resurrection Stone. That's why Ciel decided to grab the Resurrection Stone before the Goblet of Fire. But this also presents a problem, that is, whether it is a curse or black magic, it is not something that Ciel can decipher at present, unless it is violently destroyed. The most important thing is that Ciel does not even know the ancestral house of the Gaunt family. Where exactly? Of course, Ciel didn't have any plans. After Harry spoke about the Marauders map today, the plan in Ciel's mind was almost formed. Charles believed that Aberforth would never give up the conditions he offered. After all, Ariana's death was an insurmountable hurdle between the two brothers, and it was indeed their death point. Now all Ciel is missing is the information about where the Gaunt family's ancestral home is, and Ciel is going to come to him with a wave of empty gloves and white wolves. After all, no one knows the information of these ancient families more clearly than Sirius, the last only son of the Black family. Perhaps Sirius would never have thought in his life that one day he would be tricked by a student because of his family, but even if he knew, Sirius probably wouldn't care. After all, the most important thing to him might be Harry. Besides, he hardly cares about anything anymore. Ciel quickly came to the 3 Broom bars, but couldn't find any of the 3 Harry. Ciel was a little puzzled, but in desperation, he could only close his eyes and start searching with the power of the wind. It was a coincidence that because he was afraid of what danger Hermione would encounter again, Seal secretly put various element marks on Hermione after he was discharged from the hospital, just in case. In this situation, it just works. In a short while, Seal found 3 people in the forest not far away, and Seal, who had no time to think about it, hurried over. When Seal arrived, he found Harry sitting on a huge rock weeping alone, Hermione and Ron comforting a grieving Harry. "Hey, what happened?" Seal greeted with some doubts, and then moved closer. Ron and Hermione saw Seal coming, so they started talking to Seal about what happened to them after they parted. In fact, it was nothing. A few people ran to the bar and wanted to drink a butterbeer, but Harry but I saw Professor Fudge and others went up to the 2nd floor together. Driven by curiosity, Harry ran upstairs to eavesdrop despite Hermione's obstruction, but he knew the whole story and why Sirius wanted to hurt him. After Hermione and Ron finished talking, Harry seemed to have made up his mind. His face became very grim, and said to several people, "I want him to find me. If he finds me, I will fight him. I'm going to kill him to avenge my parents." Looking at Harry's hideous appearance, Ron and Hermione were both taken aback. Only Seal covered his head helplessly to express his helplessness. He didn't say much. Harry got a slap on the back of his head. This time he even slapped Harry's glasses out. Harry was emotionally overwhelmed by Seal's slap. He looked at the helpless Seal with a bewildered expression. Charles bent down, picked up the glasses on the ground and handed them to Harry, before continuing, "First of all, you can't kill anyone, and you wouldn't be able to use the killing curse even if I told you to. Secondly, do you know how many times my teacher and I wiped your ass because of your impulsiveness? In the end, what happened back then is still a huge mystery. There are too many things that don't make sense logically. My teacher and I are still investigating. So what you have to do now is to go to school honestly, take classes with peace of mind, be naughty occasionally, and be serious occasionally." Harry still looked at Charles angrily, but they all said, "Blake killed Peter, killed my parents, he was a murderer. A Death Eater." Charles helplessly looked at Harry, who was gradually getting up, and answered helplessly, "First of all, the Sorting Hat can't go wrong, Black is indeed in Gryffindor. Secondly, I just found a finger of Peter Pettigrew. In the end, Black's entire family was Death Eater, and if he was really a Death Eater, he wouldn't have to go to Gryffindor, or even cut ties with his family." After Seal finished speaking, Harry calmed down a bit and looked at Seal with some doubts, "But, he did plead guilty, didn't he?" Charles continued, "Yes, there's a difference between a guilty plea and a guilty plea, and there's a difference between killing someone intentionally and killing someone unintentionally. Harry, I've told you many times to use your brain, but you never seem to have heard it, like those idiots at the Ministry of Magic." Harry looked at Seal with some doubts. Even Hermione and Ron were a little puzzled. They all heard Harry's narration, and no one felt that there was any loophole in all this. Seeing everyone's doubtful eyes, Seal sighed helplessly. "First of all, finding only one finger is enough to make people suspicious." After finishing speaking, Seal waved his wand, and the mass of snow easily turned into a beautiful human figure under the command of Seal, and slowly turned into a red, squatty figure under the control of Seal. The moment the statue was formed, Seal just waved his wand, and the whole chunky humanoid statue burst open like a big watermelon, leaving only one finger, a red trace on the snow-white ground. Extraordinarily bright. See, no matter what kind of magic is used, it is impossible for people to disappear with only one finger in a short period of time. Even elemental magic can't do it, let alone black magic. There are many magics that can make people disappear, but all of them take time. Harry, when your knowledge is deep, you will naturally have your own judgment in the face of these situations in the future, rather than copying what others say. After Harry listened to Seal's words, he was obviously silent, and even Hermione and Ron began to think with their heads lowered. Seal was relieved to see all 3 of them lowered their heads to think. As long as Harry doesn't impulsively cause himself some inexplicable trouble, then Harry is still a good comrade. While the three of them were still thinking, looking at the red traces in the snow, Charles seemed to remember something, and interrupted his thinking by patting Harry. "Harry, work on the map at night. Lend me a hand." Harry looked at Seal with some doubts. "What do you want a map for? Filch never caught you." Seal smiled mysteriously. "White wolf with empty gloves. Trust me, you will know." Chapter 212-First Meeting with Sirius. It was just getting dark when Seal borrowed Harry's Marauder's map, and sent Harry, who wanted to go on an adventure, and told him to go to Lupin to learn the Patronus charm. After all, according to Seal's understanding, the Ministry of Magic will definitely continue to send new ones after burning so many Dementors, and maybe even send some strange things. Even Hermione was distracted by Shire's excuses. After all, the person he wanted to see was nominally a wanted criminal, so it would not be good for Hermione to know. Before Seal left, he went to Ron's to check the state of the rat. Not to mention, Pettigrew has really lost a lot of weight after being devastated by Seal. At least it looks like a normal rat. It's just that Ron, whose mother mouse has never been pregnant, begins to doubt life. After recommending a few more rat dens to Ron, Seal found a place where no one was at ease and opened Harry's Marauder's map. This opening directly made Seal feel what it means to be amazed. Can you believe that this thing is actually three-dimensional? The Marauder map can quickly locate where you are, and even watch the situation of each floor of the entire castle in detail. The most exaggerated thing is that as long as it is related to the tunnel of Hogwarts Castle, it is very intimately displayed. Even the authentic opening method is carefully marked next to it. The most amazing thing is that this thing can still display 3 views. This shit is amazing. Seal was amazed by what he saw. After playing with it for a while, he even noticed a lot of footsteps that fit together in empty classrooms or corners, etc. Why did this boy named Oleg Duggan stick with a boy named Nansen Zeller in the toilet cubicle? Charles remembers these two. It seems that they are newly admitted students of their own academy. The two are still in the same dormitory. This. Charles cleanly muttered a few words of "see no evil," and then quickly switched the screen. After seeing that Harry was with Lupin at this time, Hermione was alone in the library, and Peter and Ron were in a place on the 3rd floor. After scurrying back and forth, Seal started to search the whole map with confidence to see if he could find Sirius. It didn't take long for Seal to spot the trail of Sirius on the map, while he was in the secret passage leading to the Shrieking Shack. A smile appeared on Sha'ur's face, and after finishing his clothes, Sha'ur strode in the direction of the Punching Willow. When he came to the side of the Beating Willow, the bottom of Seal's heart began to sum up. There was no other reason. If this thing was wrong, it would be a real beating. He hesitated for a while, but in the end he gritted his teeth and stretched out his hand to scratch on the burr, and then ran back almost as much as he could. The twigs that were expected to fly away did not come, and the Beating Willow trembled happily for a while, as if it was scratched by Seal, and then a small door popped up at the root. Sha'ur was relieved when he saw that he had successfully opened the secret passage. He cautiously returned to the original place, and slowly got into the secret passage. To be honest, Seal regretted it when he rushed in. He should have taken the opportunity to ventilate when he came in. The entire secret passage was full of dust and cobwebs at this time, and a strong musty smell shot straight to Seal's forehead. Not caring about anything else, Sha'ur cleanly cast a bubble head spell on himself, and then he started walking along the secret passage with confidence. During the period, he even released flames to thoroughly clean up the spider webs and other things in the secret passage. Finally, I don't know how long it took, and Seal finally came to the end of the secret passage. A tattered wooden staircase appeared in front of Seal. After carefully testing the strength, Seal quickly climbed to the top of the stairs. When Seal came out of the secret passage, he saw a big black dog lying on the floor at first sight. The big black dog stood up vigilantly when he saw Seal, and then seemed to take Seal. After becoming an ordinary student who slipped out of school to find excitement, he lay down again with a nonchalant expression on his face. After all, who would suspect a bony stray dog? After seeing Sirius, Seal didn't get too excited, and he didn't care about Sirius lying there. Instead, he began to walk around in the screaming shack. After all, it was the first time that Seal came to this legend. The haunted house is also very curious here. But soon Seal got tired of shopping. To put it bluntly, it was just a dilapidated and dusty house. The only thing that came out was that the house was well preserved, plus that pile of legends. After looking left and right, Seal returned to the first room. Sirius was still lying on the floor listlessly, and Seal didn't care. He took out his wand to repair and clean the whole house. After this set was completed, Seal found a chair at random, sat down opposite Sirius and began to look at the results of his labor. And by the way, he thought about how to start a deal with the big black dog on the opposite side. On the contrary, Sirius looked at Seal with some doubts. He could understand the risk, but the activity of repairing and cleaning the room seemed to have another purpose. In addition, Seal's handsome and unusual face made him a big black dog for a while. As if he understood something, he looked at the old god, Seal, who was sitting opposite him, with a look that people really knew how to play with. Seal clearly saw Sirius's eyes. As a man, Seal understood the meaning of Sirius's eyes almost instantly. A black line on his face was no longer tangled, and he spoke directly and said, "Hey, don't look at me like that, I can tell you very clearly that you are thinking crooked." Hearing Seal's words, Sirius was taken aback, and then he remembered that he was a big black dog, so he hummed innocently and continued to lie down. He didn't have a wand in his hand. It was estimated that a Dementor's kiss didn't run away, not to mention that Sirius's target was clearly Peter, and he didn't want to hurt other people. Seeing Sirius lying down again, as if I was a dog and telling me what to do, Seal sighed helplessly, and then said, "Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Seal, Charles Lancaster, Dumbledore's pupil. I think you should know me. How to talk about it, Blake." As soon as Seal's voice fell, Sirius, who was called by his broken name, stood up almost like a conditioned reflex, showing an attacking attitude towards Seal. Seal didn't care. He waved his hand and continued, "Don't be like this, Uncle Black, trust me, let's talk about it. Don't worry, I don't mean anything. Otherwise, it's not me, but the aura or the camera." Ghostly. Chapter 213-Deal with Black. After hearing Seal's words, Blake hesitated for a moment, then turned back into a human form, looking at Seal with a wary look on his thin face. "How did you find me? And what are you doing?" But Seal didn't answer Black, but pinched his nose tightly, saying that magic is really magical, and it doesn't have any smell when it's a dog. "Oh my god, how long did I say you haven't showered? Before answering your question, I strongly advise you to clean up first." After Seal finished speaking, without waiting for Blake to object, he stretched out his hand and created a spinning water polo next to Blake. He also thoughtfully added the element of fire to warm the water. As soon as Seal's voice fell, a rare embarrassed expression appeared on Blake's face. Looking at the disgusted Seal opposite him, he felt a little bit wrong for a while. Until Seal didn't use his wand, he just raised his hand to make the steaming water polo, and Black looked at Seal in surprise. He said that the 1,000-year-old Black family knew about Seal. What does this hand represent? In terms of force alone, let alone the self who doesn't have a wand now, even if he is in a state of complete victory with a wand, it is difficult for him to face Seal. Elemental magicians and wizards are almost an insurmountable gap. He sighed as if resigning his fate, and while doubting his life, Blake wondered whether Hogwarts was so wild now, and he started playing elements before he graduated, and said helplessly, "Okay, what the hell are you doing? What to do?" Seal pinched his nose and looked away from Blake. He pointed to the big water polo that was still spinning slowly and said, "You go wash it first, then don't take off your clothes. Your clothes are probably more smelly." Looking at Seal's appearance, Blake also accepted his fate, and stepped into the water polo without hesitation. After all, if Seal really wanted to harm him, he wouldn't have to bother so much. There is absolutely no way to fight back with his current self. Powerful. In just a short while, Black came out of the water polo, and Seal looked at the wet black in the water polo, which had obviously turned black, for a long time and was speechless. He threw the water polo out of the window, and Seal took out his wand from his arms and gave Blake a drying spell before returning to his original chair. Blake was also a little embarrassed. After all, the man opposite him was younger than him, and he was more powerful than him. The most important thing was that the water polo just now changed from clear water to black. Blake was also a little speechless. But soon Blake regained his state, found a place to sit down and looked at Charles. "Okay, tell me, what exactly are you looking for me for?" Seal curled his lips when he saw this handsome old man who had just been washed with a simple machine, and then said, "I've come to you to make a deal that you can't refuse." Hearing Seal's words, Blake couldn't help raising his eyebrows, looked at Seal curiously and asked, "What deal? Let me hear it." Seeing that Blake had taken the bait, a smile appeared on the corner of Seal's mouth, and then he continued, "Let me talk about the pay first. The pay is very simple. You can justifiably accompany your godson Harry, and openly and honestly. You are not wanted by the Ministry of Magic anywhere. And your nemesis Peter Pettigrew will take responsibility for his own sins, and must end up dying in despair and fear. What do you think of this kind of compensation?" After hearing Seal's words, Sirius frowned and looked at Seal with a dangerous look. "Who are you? Why do you know so much? Also, what do I have to pay?" Hearing Blake's words, Charles smiled even more proudly. "I said, I'm Dumbledore's apprentice, Charles Lancaster. As for why I know so much, you don't care. You can only say me there is more to know than you think, as to what you have to pay. It's very simple, a piece of information or help me with one thing, and then you have to follow my instructions throughout the process until the transaction is completed. Although I understand your hatred for Peter, I don't want your impulse to ruin what my teacher and I have planned for a long time. Can you understand what I say?" After Blake heard Seal's words, he began to lower his head and began to ponder. Strictly speaking, Seal's proposal is really tempting. Who doesn't want to walk under the sun? But thinking of that damn mouse for a moment, a nameless anger in Blake's heart almost spewed out. Charles clearly saw the tangle on Blake's face, and continued without waiting for Blake to speak. "I believe you should know what kind of life Harry has lived in these past few years, although you can disagree with what I said. You're enemies, but what about your godson, poor Harry? And as far as I know, you should be the last person in the Black family. If you kill Peter for no reason, he will probably stay in history with honor, but you can only welcome the soul Weirdkiss. The most important thing is that you can hardly leave anything to Harry except killing Harry's real enemy. You must know that according to the current law, after your death, the property of the Black family belongs to Gringotts. In other words, even if you are still alive, you cannot control any property in prison. As long as you're dead, the goblins at Gringotts will still get a lot of treasure, and your poor godson Harry is pretty much kept in the dark and continues to live his poor life." Seal said these words without blushing or beating, but his heart was already filled with lemons, not to mention how many gold galleons there are in the Black family's vault, just Harry's one. Enough to make Charles drool. Seal secretly made up his mind that he must eat the food of Harry's big dog in the future, but he still looked at Blake calmly. After a long time, Blake seemed to be persuaded by Seal's statement. He sighed helplessly and said, "Okay, you have successfully persuaded me, so what shall I do next?" Seeing that Blake had promised himself, Seal secretly made a comparison in his heart, and then continued to say casually, "It's very simple. I need you to help me investigate a piece of information. The sooner the better. I need to know where the Gaunt family's ancestral home is." Blake was a little surprised to hear what Seal said. "The Gaunt family. You know what this is for?" "As far as I know, the Gaunt family has long been gone." Hearing Black's words, Charles smiled mysteriously. "No, Uncle Black, what I want is a ruby ring hidden in the Gaunt family's ancestral home. As for the reason, I don't think you should know. Let's go as soon as possible. Uncle Black, when you come back is when our deal is done." Chapter 214 _ Christmas. After listening to Seal's words, Black thought thoughtfully for a while, and then nodded in agreement. Hill saw that Black nodded and agreed to his request without ink, and took out a wand from his arms and threw it to Blake. "I picked it up before. The dragon nerve. Let's make use of it. Set off as soon as possible and pay attention to safety. This must be done secretly, and, as far as I know, the house of the Gaunt family is full of curses and black magic, so thousands of don't try to break in. I don't want to collect your body, just come back as soon as you know the address." After hearing CL's instructions, Blake obviously didn't take it seriously, but he didn't refute it, just pouted and didn't speak. He turned around and was about to leave the room. He wanted to leave now, but when he walked to the gate, he seemed to think of something. He stopped and turned to look at Charles. "Charles, can you do me a favor?" Black looked a little embarrassed. Seal also looked at Black with some doubts, not knowing what this guy was doing. Seeing Seal looking at him suspiciously, Blake blushed, gritted his teeth and continued, "Last time I saw Harry's broom break at the Quidditch match. I want to give him a broom, but, yes, my status as a fugitive doesn't allow me to use the Black family's property right now. Therefore, I hope you can pay for me first, and I will pay you back immediately after our transaction is completed. Do you think it is okay?" Seal turned his head away. He really didn't understand why these people were always so obsessed with brooms. In CL's opinion, was flying a car not good? If Quidditch allowed this, and Seal drove a speeder across the goal, that would be invincible. "Okay. You throw whatever you want. I'm drinking tea in the car, that's the king." But Black spoke up, and Seal really had no reason to refuse. After all, Harry's broom destroyed him last time and contributed a small part. But considering his shriveled wallet, Seal still gritted his teeth. "Okay, I will use an anonymous method to help you order a firebolt. But the interest is a copper nut a day. Don't look at me like that. No negotiation. If you say sterling I'm pretty rich." Seeing that Seal was about to bite his teeth, Blake agreed with CL's statement. After all, the family has a big business, and Blake said that it is not bad for this interest. But Seal was so poor that it was beyond Blake's expectations. At first, he thought that Seal was a descendant of that pure blood family. Little did he know that at this time, Seal had already begun to think about how to get some urgent needs out of Dumbledore's pension. Blake shrugged, then turned into a black dog and happily left the screaming shack and disappeared into the night. Seal gritted his teeth and stood by the window watching Blake disappear into the night. Feeling lost. Seeing that Blake had left, Seal no longer had any ink marks, turned on the bubble head spell and drilled back down the secret passage. By the time Blake came back, Peter should have ended his career as a breeder. The only thing that is uncertain now is Buckbeak. Although according to Dumbledore, a small number of pure blood seem to want to be on their side, but they just don't know how Buckbeak will be. Not on my own side. Are you going to the hearing? While walking in the secret passage, Seal began to live his thoughts in his mind constantly. Soon, Seal vetoed his appearance at the Ministry of Magic to participate in the hearing. The reason is very simple. It's not time for Fudge to notice him. Although this Abs Fudge doesn't have a smart brain, he is afraid to think too much about such a fool who thinks he is very smart, especially such a fool. Egg is also very confident and persistent. I didn't think of a good way until I left the secret road, but sure is not in a hurry anymore. Just take it slow, there must be a way to the front of the mountain. If it is not possible, just follow the original book. After escaping the castle's inspectors, Seal successfully returned to his bed. When Seal closed his eyes, the only doubt was that he didn't see any Dementors along the way. Otherwise, Seal would definitely I wouldn't go back to the bedroom so quietly. As everyone knows, the Dementors are hiding from Seal now. After feeling the breath of Seal, all Dementors will use the fastest speed to stay away from Seal. The fire left a deep impression on them. Time quickly slipped through his fingers. It had been almost a week since Blake left. During this time, Blake did not even come back with a message. Seal began to wonder if Blake did not obey him. Instructed to enter the old house of the Gaunt family. Although he would occasionally tease him like this, the upcoming Christmas still made Seal very busy. The reason is very simple. There are too many gifts to send. Of course, what gave Seal the most headache was Harry's gift. Seal went to Dumbledore's headmaster's office many times, and finally our Dumbledore was finally hanged in Seal's offensive. The next promised to lend the money to Charles. In short, Seal is still not at a loss. Of course, this is under the condition that Black is still willing to pay the interest after his return. Soon, Christmas is coming, and it is no surprise that everyone is reluctant to go home this year, so there are obviously more students staying at Hogwarts. Therefore, the whole castle seemed very lively. When Seal woke up from the bed on Christmas Day, he smiled happily at the gift that he could almost bury himself in. After happily opening the blind box all morning, Charles was surprised to discover something unusual. This Christmas, Charles received more than just gifts from friends and professors. Among the piles of gifts, Seal found a lot of invitations from pure-blood families and some gifts that looked expensive but could be sold for nothing. Shutter smiled and accepted all the receipts, and copied and pasted a lot of thank you letters to get rid of the owl and let go. As for the rest of the invitation letters, Shutter refused all the letters in the reply, saying that he could not leave the school. The icing was eaten and the cannonballs were returned, and Seal was still having a good time. Of course, what surprised Seal the most in this pair of gifts was not someone else's, but it was Snape's gift, although his gift was it was only at noon that the owl delivered it to Seal. But when Seal opened the box and found almost a large bottle of fulling, this little fault was ignored by Seal. Some people must be curious, what gift did Seal give Snape to get Snape to return the gift like this? Very simple, a paper on the cloned sheep dolly. Although Seal won't be involved in this, it's still good to give hope to the desperate, isn't it? Of course, this matter can't be let a third person know about it. Chapter 215-Unexpected Letter. There was no news from Blake for the entire Christmas holiday, and Charles even began to wonder if Blake had seen something, and even began to pray silently in his heart that Blake would never wear that damn ring. What surprised Seal was that Aberforth had already started sending a letter a day after Christmas, and he began to urge Seal to take action. At first, Seal could understand it. For Brydor, the death of his sister is a thorn in their hearts that cannot be removed. Aberforth didn't know what method Seal would use to get him and his sister to meet, but the temptation to talk to his sister in person made him anxious. But Aberforth's urging seemed to have had the opposite effect. At first, Seal replied politely that he was still collecting information, but as time went on, Seal didn't know what to reply, so Seal simply didn't bother. Recalled. In this way, the Christmas holiday quietly came to the last day in Charles's guilt and impatience towards Aberforth. Today is the day that all Hogwarts students who have left school return to school. After all, classes start tomorrow. Shutter slept until noon. After washing up, he wandered into the hall to eat lunch. He was thinking about whether to take a bath or go to the library to continue his magical exploration. The owl, whom I did not know at all, stumbled in and flew in. The owl seemed to have been flying for a long time, almost plunged its head into Seal's dinner plate in a falling posture, and then began to feast on it without caring about anything else. Seal looked at the embarrassed owl, and the corners of his mouth twitched constantly. After thinking for a while, Seal decided not to disturb the tired owl for the time being, and he carefully untied the letter tied to the owl's claws. At first, Seal thought it was a letter from Aberforth. After all, after he didn't reply, the old man seemed to start sending the letter to an owl, and even Seal began to fear whether the old man would send him a copy one day. Roar letter. But when the letter started, Seal found a metal product through the envelope, and Seal knew immediately that this thing was definitely not from Aberforth. After carefully avoiding the crowd, Seal slowly opened the letter, and what he saw was an ancient bronze key, which seemed to be self-cultivation. After slowly opening the envelope with the wand operator, Seal finally felt relieved. The reason was not her. There was a small symbol of the Deathly Hallows inside the envelope. When he saw this symbol, Seal let go of his guard, put away his wand with confidence, and reached out to hold the key that was floated in the air by his own spell. But what Seal never expected was that just as he grabbed the key, Seal felt as if a big hook had been hooked under his belly button, and his body began to spin continuously. At this time, Charles was stupid and knew what this thing was. Damn, Grindelwald sent himself a damn door key without saying anything. If it wasn't for the fact that Seal didn't feel like his newly full stomach was tumbling over and didn't dare to speak, Seal would definitely have started sending telegrams. In just a short while, Seal felt that his feet were on the ground again, and before Seal could see where he was, Seal felt that his stomach began to churn. Unable to hold back, Seal succeeded in returning all the lunch he had eaten at noon today to the earth. When Sha'ur was still being ravaged by the rainbow-spitting Yue, a cold voice with a disgusting tone sounded behind Sha'ur. "Charles, it's time to fix your motion sickness." After hearing this voice, Seal still kept his posture facing the Lois and his back to the sky, but still stubbornly freed up a hand and made an international friendly gesture towards the direction from which the voice came. After a long time, Seal barely suppressed his tumultuous stomach, stood up and began to look around at the environment around him, not forgetting to justify himself while looking around. "Dear Mr. Grindelwald, I'm not car sick, but I'm definitely fighter sick. Normally, there are not many people who don't get dizzy, so please give me the address directly next time." Grindelwald didn't take Seal's sophistry seriously, he just laughed disdainfully, and then slowly came to Seal. "Where are we?" Charles asked suspiciously, looking at the unfamiliar surroundings. Grindelwald's complexion was very complicated, and he pondered for a while before saying, "Godric's Canyon, near Dumbledore's ancestral home." Hearing Grindelwald's words, Charles was very surprised. "Why did you ask me to come here?" Grindelwald walked forward with Seal, and said with a complicated expression, "After I left Dumbledore's side, I obtained the Elder Wand in a duel. For the purpose of commemoration, I secretly returned here after I obtained the Elder Wand, where I met Dumbledore, and secretly hid my wand in Dumbledore's ancestral home." Seal still didn't understand what Grindelwald meant, still wondering, "So what? Are you going to get your wand back now?" Grindelwald just shook his head. "No, I need to find out how the goddamn goblin manipulated my wand. I definitely don't want to make the same mistake again." Seal shrugged, still didn't understand what the purpose of Grindelwald's calling him came, but he thought that he was doing nothing at school anyway, so it was not impossible to follow him for a walk. After all, if you want to be detrimental to yourself under Grindelwald's eyes, you really have to ask the old man beside you if you agree. Grindelwald didn't know that Seal had completely regarded this trip as a distraction at this time, and walked ahead and continued to say to Seal, "Since we parted in Paris, I have begun to investigate the goblins. But unfortunately, these goddamn goblins are too good at hiding, and I didn't find any useful information except for catching some innocuous outsiders. That's why I thought that since those fairies can manipulate the outcome of our duel, they will inevitably leave traces of magic. So I decided to start with my wand, and even if there were no clues, I didn't want this to happen again." Hearing Grindelwald talk a lot, Seal pouted helplessly, and finally couldn't help but ask, "So, teacher, why did you call me here?" Chapter 216-Toolman-Char. Hearing Seal's words, Grindelwald laughed happily, but seemed to be smiling very sadly. "You have always been curious about what happened with me and Dumbledore back then, so I think you should also know what kind of contract I made with him back then." Seal was still in a condescending manner, but when he heard Grindelwald talk about the events of the year, Seal felt that he suddenly woke up. "Teacher, if you talk about it, I won't be sleepy. Of course I know, the Blood Alliance, the strictest alliance contract in the world." Looking at Seal's shining eyes, Grindelwald looked at Seal angrily and funny. "I really don't know why you are so curious about those things back then, it's clearly recorded in the book." When Charles heard Grindelwald's words, he couldn't help but pouted and said nothing. "In the book. Only a small part of the history recorded in the book can be believed. After all, it can be changed, and only the memory of the person concerned is true. The most important thing is that reading a book is not as real as watching a movie." Seal has not forgotten his dream, but he has read the entire Fantastic Beasts series in advance. For this great goal, Seal wants the memories of the three protagonists. That guy is alone and the movie is not complete. Grindelwald didn't know that Shire was full of thoughts of wanting to see a movie, and just continued. That's right, the Blood Alliance. I made a blood alliance with Dumbledore. So I didn't save the best memory that belonged to me and him. I used the Blood Alliance to hide the entire Dumbledore's ancestral home, and similarly, also hidden my wand. When Seal heard Grindelwald's words, his jaw was about to fall to the ground. It turned out that Seal just thought that his teacher and brother just chose to move out of the ancestral house because they didn't want to recall the sad memory. Unexpectedly, this big-eyed Grindelwald hid the house. Looking at Seal with the Grindelwald expression he didn't expect you to look at himself, Grindelwald's old face flushed and he said, "Don't look at me like that. I did hide their house, but that it is based on the magic established by the Blood Alliance, that old bee he can definitely crack." Quote. Charles pursed his lips and asked, "Then, teacher, why did you call me here?" Grindelwald sighed, "I was based on the magic set by the Blood Alliance. Although the Blood Alliance is broken, I still want to use the method I set to open it. You can treat it as an old man's willfulness." The more Seal was told by Grindelwald, the more confused he became. The Blood Alliance between his teacher and his master, who cares about Seal? Looking at Seal's disgusting expression, Grindelwald felt that his blood pressure began to rise again. Seal, this little brat, is fine with everything, but this expression is really cheap and makes people want to give him a good beating. The Blood Alliance has been broken, but if you want to open it according to the conditions, you still need that old bee or someone related to him. The people who are most connected with him in this world are only his stupid brother and you. Grindelwald still explained it to Seal. "But I'm not Dumbledore." Seal didn't understand what Grindelwald meant. It stands to reason that things like blood alliances are based on blood, so in this world, there are only two people who can meet the conditions without violence to start this magic. Just Leto. Looking at Seal's silly and sweet appearance, Grindelwald felt that his blood pressure was circling back and forth on the brink of danger. "You kid, are you playing at school every day? Or is that old bee didn't teach you anything at all? Until now, you didn't know the existence of ritual magic?" Seeing Grindelwald's appearance, Charles couldn't help but recall the fear of being dominated by his parents in his previous life. At this time, Grindelwald looked like a furious parent who learned that his children did not study well in school and then returned home. Looking at Grindelwald's appearance, Seal still stood up honestly, waiting for Grindelwald's explanation, and looking at Seal's cowardly and obedient appearance, Grindelwald felt like he would be stunned in the next second. Feeling of having a heart attack. After trying to calm down his emotions, Grindelwald slowly explained to Seal, "Your apprenticeship ceremony was basically a very classic ritual magic. After performing this ritual magic, although you have no blood relationship with Dumbledore, from a magical point of view, you are already the heir to Dumbledore. To put it simply, after this magic is done, it is okay in the magical world to call you Charles Dumbledore even if you go out." After listening to Grindelwald's words, Seal felt that his three views were overturned for a while. At first, Seal just thought that this apprenticeship was just a simple ceremony. Who would have thought that this would be the case? However, Seal was shocked, but he quickly accepted this statement. After all, it also explained from the side why he could summon Fox. At this time, Seal had completely figured out a lot of things. At the same time, Seal also immediately understood a lot of things, why Dumbledore began to be so concerned about himself after the apprenticeship ceremony. Even the plans after that and the childish thought that Seal had when he first met Dumbledore were included in Dumbledore's future plans. For a while, Seal's heart was filled with emotion and guilt. The reason was very simple. After apprenticeship, the wise old man seemed to be really silently doing a lot for himself. Fortunately, Seal's emotion did not last long before being interrupted by Grindelwald. "Okay, here we are. I'll send Dumbledore a letter to explain the situation regarding your studies. Damn old bee, if he doesn't want to, I'd be more than willing to adopt you." Seal stared at the empty scenery around him with a black line on his head. He didn't know how to react for a while. He could only stare blankly at Grindelwald. Grindelwald looked at the cute seal, angrily, slightly disgusted, and instructed Seal to cut his fingers and stretch out his hand. Grindelwald also cut his fingers and stretched out his hand. Just as they both stretched out their hands, a miraculous thing happened. A drop of blood flew out from the fingertips of the two of them. Dazzling light. Then Seal heard a sound like a burst of bubbles, and when Seal opened his eyes again, a quaint manor appeared in front of Seal. Grindelwald ignored Seal at all, stepped forward and pushed open the door of the manor. Feeling extremely indignant at Grindelwald's ignoring Seal, even a tool man can't just use it up like this, right? Seal, who was in the spirit of death, came to Grindelwald in front of Grindelwald like a child, and asked Grindelwald with the most innocent tone and cutest face. High words. Then teacher, according to what you said about the ritual magic of me and my master, should I call you godfather or godmother? Chapter 217-2 Wands. On the last day of the Christmas holiday, a creepy rumor came out of Godric Canyon. It was rumored that in the depths of the canyon, an evil spirit came, and the evil spirit would recall his tragic death on the last day of the Christmas holiday. Appearance, and then will make a very miserable roar, even mixed with unknown spells and curses. Of course, at this time, the initiator of all this, Seal, did not know that he had become a talking point among the people of Godric Canyon, and even contributed a lot to the town's tourism for a time. Seal was covering his scarred cheeks and honestly following behind Grindelwald. After all, it was Seal's usual style to do the biggest death and use the most expensive treatment. Although Grindelwald didn't use the unforgivable curse to give Seal an unforgettable journey, but Seal couldn't help but complain when he looked at his bruised face. It might be better to cast a pleasant torment curse on himself. At the very least, the carpal bones will not return to make Seal become as bruised and swollen as he is now. If he goes back, he will have to accept a second wave of mental attacks called the ridicule of his friends. At this time, Shatter had begun to regret why he didn't bring his small box with him. If nothing else, at least the potion in it could guarantee him a decent return. Grindelwald, who had beaten Seal, felt refreshed. He felt that his blood pressure, which had been soared by Seal's anger, had gone down at this time. His head was no longer painful, and he even had the energy to walk with him. Grindelwald took Seal to the manor and walked towards the only house. At this time, Charles only had the intention to look at his master's ancestral home. To be honest, Dumbledore Manor was not very big, and it could even be said to be pitiful. But it is such a manor, but it reveals mystery and nobility all the time, especially the ubiquitous phoenix pattern, which shows the mystery of Dumbledore's manor. Almost all the way, Seal felt that his eyes were not enough. After all, this was where Dumbledore grew up, and Seal was very curious. At the same time, Seal still felt unreal, as if it was the first time that he realized that his teacher, who was omnipotent and intelligent, was also an ordinary human, with unknown childishness and childhood. Grindelwald didn't care about the curious Seal, but walked quickly to the house with a gloomy face. The room was not dirty. It seemed to be due to magic. The house at this time seemed to be the owner of yesterday, just like leaving. This made Seal have to admire. After all, if you look at the ancestral home of the Black family, which is also a pure-blood family, it has only been a few short years, and now it is too dilapidated to take into account. Soon, under the leadership of Grindelwald, the two came to a small house. Grindelwald looked at the door of the house for a while and hesitated for a while, and looked at the bruised but curious Seal helplessly explaining. Said, "This is the room where Dumbledore and I lived back then. This is the beginning of everything, and it is also the beautiful end of that year." After listening to Grindelwald's words, Seal's eyes seemed to glow, and he avoided Grindelwald at once, and opened the door that had been sealed for a long time in place of the hesitant old man. The eye-catching room is not too big, it can even be said to be a little small. There are two small single beds in the room, and there is a bedside table in the middle. The overall layout is like the student dormitory of European and American universities in the movie. The sun shines through the window and the room looks warm. The only difference I have to say is the wands on their respective beds. When Grindelwald walked into the room and saw the wands on the two beds, he was a little overwhelmed for a while. He came back too. And he actually made the same choice as me. Grindelwald muttered to himself. Seal looked at Grindelwald and didn't know how to comfort the old man for a while. In Ciel's view, it was obvious that the two were too proud to let go, but they were caused by some misunderstandings that they thought could be made. A tragic love story of parting ways, but missing each other. With a helpless sigh, Seal stepped forward to comfort Grindelwald. Teacher, I don't think this is the time to miss you, so check your wand first. And I think that when the teacher has time, you should have a good talk with the master. Sometimes strength can't solve all problems. The most important thing is that, compared to the love and hatred between the two of you, what I care most about is whether the master has guessed the truth of what happened back then. After all, according to the time, the master sent the wand back after you. Hearing Ciel's concern, Grindelwald realized that. He pushed Ciel away and began to study it carefully, and then he was relieved. Fortunately, my wand doesn't appear to have been moved, or even the little magic I've placed on it has been triggered. Hearing Grindelwald's words, Ciel was relieved, but then another question appeared in Ciel's mind. How did his master come in silently, and still ensure that the protective magic outside is still intact? Grindelwald shook his head with a wry smile after learning about Ciel's doubts. Even he didn't know how Dumbledore did it. But the good news now is that Dumbledore also left the wand here, so if the two wands are combined to study, the proportion of flaws will obviously be higher. At this time, Grindelwald didn't care about Ciel. He waved his wand and began to check the two wands one by one. Countless Ciel's unnamed spells flew towards him as if they didn't want money. 2 magic wands. After a while, Grindelwald's face became more and more gloomy, and as Grindelwald chanted the last incantation, something similar to a metal wire gradually flew out from the wands of both of them. What is this? Charles looked at the 2 metal filaments, which were not much thicker than a hair. I don't know, but the only certainty is that this thing is definitely the work of a goblin. The alchemy of wizards can't find such a fine thing. Grindelwald frowned deeply, as if thinking about something. His face looked gloomy and terrible. And Ciel lowered his head and thought about something. What surprised Ciel was that this thing actually had 2 wands, so would his own wand have this thing too? All of a sudden, Ciel felt a chill rushing towards his forehead from the soles of his feet. Looking at the gloomy Grindelwald, Charles handed over his wand. Teacher, can you check it for me? Chapter 218_Smart Hermione. Seeing the wand that Ciel handed over, Grindelwald also carefully took out his wand and checked it out. Fortunately, the ending was good, and there was nothing tricky about Ciel's wand. This result made both of them heave a sigh of relief at the same time. It turned out that even the goblins couldn't accomplish something comprehensively. After Grindelwald found the evidence, he hurried away with Ciel, not even giving Ciel a chance to take a good look at this dusty ancestral home. All the way to the gate of the manor, Grindelwald hurriedly said all right to you, and then reactivated the magic that sealed the residence in the first place, and then turned around and disappeared in front of Ciel. A series of actions were as smooth as dove, and they didn't give Ciel any chance to speak at all. Ciel looked at the disappearing Grindelwald speechlessly, not knowing why there was always a hint of sadness. If nothing else, Ciel felt that he had experienced the sadness of those 2 people who were used up and abandoned. Helplessly, he looked at the key that was made into a door key in his pocket, and finally Ciel gritted his teeth and grabbed it, and returned to Hogwarts through the door key. When Ciel sorted himself out and appeared in Gryffindor's lounge again, the 3 of Hermione came together to ask where Ciel went. In desperation, Ciel could only fool the 3 of them to go out with Dumbledore on errands. Anyway, the 3 of them couldn't really question Dumbledore. Ciel felt that the reason for this panacea was really easy to use, and was there a problem with the teacher's question when it came to the teacher? Sha'ur's mentor was at ease, but after hearing Sha'ur's reason, the 3 of them pouted and said nothing. Instead, Hermione took out a letter from her bosom and stuffed it into Ciel's hand. When you were leaving, and I'll send you a letter. I'll take it for you when you're not there. I really don't know what you are busy with every day. If I hadn't received the letter, the poor owl would still fly tremblingly into such a cold wind and snow to continue looking for you." After hearing Hermione's words, Seal could only apologize with a wry smile. After all, he couldn't tell Hermione about killing Seal when he went to be a tool for the first generation of the Dark Lord. Otherwise, he really didn't know what would happen. "What does it look like?" It was the letter in Hermione's hand that caught Shire's attention. The entire letter was empty, except for a handwritten letter B in swashbuckling that could not be seen unless you looked carefully at the lower right corner of the envelope. There were no letters in it, just an empty envelope. Hermione seemed even more annoyed to see Seal receiving such a letter. They began to scold the people who had carried out this prank, and the three boys, Seal, Harry and Ron, coaxed for a long time before Hermione calmed down. It wasn't until Hermione calmed down that Harry hurriedly changed the subject, talking about the fact that he had started learning the Patronus charm with Professor Lupin. Under the circumstance that Harry's topic changed off, Hermione and Ron successfully began to discuss the magic of this magic with Harry. Only Seal began to bow his head and ponder. If there is no accident, this letter must have been sent by Blake, which also proves one thing: Blake is back. Seal decides to go to the Screaming Shack sometime tonight and meet Blake. As night fell, Seal quietly brought a big bag with him to the cafeteria, and then went to deliver it to Blake. Not to mention, at least they should have brought some food to them after helping you so much, right? Just as Seal tiptoed to the lounge, a voice suddenly appeared behind Seal and startled Seal. "Charles, where are you going?" "Looking for Blake." Seal turned to look in an unusually horrified manner, and only slowly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw who was coming. It was none other than Hermione. But after hearing the content of Hermione's words, Seal couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. "Blake, Hermione, don't make a fuss, that's a wanted man. I just wanted to go to the kitchen and get something to eat." Seal hurriedly explained, and didn't forget to show Hermione the big bag in his hand, as soon as he said that what he said was true. Seeing Seal's appearance, Hermione sighed helplessly. "Do you know, Seal, you never lie back. Every time you lie in front of me, you don't dare to look directly at me." A little skeptical, but now I'm almost sure. Seeing Hermione's determined look, Seal was speechless for a while. After thinking for a while, Seal decided to give up resistance. "Okay, you guessed it right, how did you come out?" Seeing Seal giving up her resistance, Hermione smiled triumphantly. "I know you too well, Seal. It felt wrong to me right from the start. You were more worried about the Dementors than Black, and it was obvious once you entered the school that you weren't worried about anything. You didn't even look worried during Black's first invasion, which of course wasn't enough to make me suspicious, but your remarks at Hogsmeade made me realize something. You believe that Blake is innocent, so you're more worried about the Dementors than Blake, which explains how you've been acting since the beginning of the semester. Of course, the most certain thing for me is the letter you received, Blake for B, for fear of leaking the information, so there is nothing in the envelope." After Hermione finished speaking, she did not forget to give Seal a triumphant expression, but Seal reluctantly said that this girl was really too smart. Seal wanted to resist, and didn't want Hermione to participate so much. Just as he was about to move out, his teacher, Dumbledore, was interrupted by Hermione. "So, Seal, tell me, what's the situation? I don't believe you just believed Black's words. What do you know?" Hermione pressed Seal as she started to pursue her victory. Seeing Hermione's appearance that you don't want to leave until you explain clearly, Seal sighed helplessly, and explained the beginning of the matter to Hermione. When Hermione heard that Ron's mouse was Peter Pettigrew, her mouth didn't close, and she even grabbed Seal nervously, wanting to go to Ron's bedroom to catch the damn mouse immediately. Fortunately, in the end, Seal still appeased Hermione, and said that under his own actions, Peter's life was definitely better than death, and he definitely didn't have the strength to come out and do things again, and Hermione calmed down. As for why he didn't hand over Peter Pettigrew now in exchange for Blake's innocence, Seal could only spread his hands to indicate that the time had not yet come. Chapter 219-Night Party Serious. After Seal finally appeased Hermione, Seal hurriedly got out, and before leaving, he did not forget to ask Hermione to ask Crookshanks to pay more attention to Peter. Fortunately, Hermione didn't ask to follow Seal on the adventure, so Seal could quickly get out of the kitchen to get some food, and then hurry to the Screaming Shack. If you hurry up, Seal can guarantee his 6 hours of sleep. But compared to Seal's midnight adventure, Hermione was actually more worried about Ron's mouse after learning the truth. After all, according to Seal, the real enemy should be Peter, not the wrong kid. Serious. Of course, Seal didn't know about Hermione's worries. At this time, Seal was on his way to the Shrieking Shack. After passing through the long musty-smelling tunnel, Seal finally got out of the tunnel, but to his surprise, Sirius Black did not appear in front of Seal at this time. Seal immediately felt something was wrong. He picked up his wand and watched the surroundings carefully. The dark environment of the Screaming Shack gave Seal a good way to hide. Silently hiding in a dark corner, Seal carefully watched everything around him. Just as Seal was watching the surroundings nervously, Blake's voice came from the entrance of the stairs. "You came much later than I thought." After speaking, Blake came out of the shadows. At this time, Blake was a little embarrassed, but he had recovered to the appearance of a normal person. Just still very thin. He still held the wand that Seal gave him in his hand, and kept turning his forehead in circles. Charles breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Blake. "Just come back. Don't do this next time, it's so mysterious, I thought it was some kind of trap." After he finished speaking, he threw the big bag in his hand to Blake. "Here, the food I brought from the kitchen should be enough for you to eat for a while. How is it, have you found the address of Gaunt's house?" After Black took Ciel's bag, he couldn't help frowning when he heard Ciel's question, and replied, "I found it. Not only I found it, but I also went there once. The house is full of all kinds of black magic traps. Fortunately, when I was studying in school, my grades were not bad." Quote. Hearing Blake's words, Charles was surprised. "Did you go in?" "Yes, I went in. Not only that, I also found the ring you wanted." After Blake finished speaking, he waved his wand, and the image of a diamond-shaped gemstone ring appeared in the air. "Is this the ring?" Blake asked, looking relaxed. "That's right, where's the ring? You didn't touch it." Charles looked very nervous when he saw the resurrection stone ring. If Blake really touched the ring because of Voldemort's Horcrux impression, then it is estimated that after Harry can kill myself. Fortunately, for Shire's anxious look, Blake seemed very old-fashioned. "No, I didn't touch it. This ring was hidden by me. I need to re-examine our transaction." After Blake said these words, it seemed that his expression became a little serious. Staring at Seal, Seal also clearly felt something was wrong, and tightened the wand in his hand and stared at Blake without exaggeration. No matter who is present, as long as there is a slight change, it will inevitably be a war. Black obviously also investigated Seal during this time. At this time, Black knew that if he wanted to fight, he would definitely not be able to beat Seal, but when it came to escape, Seal who didn't master apparition would definitely stop him. "Can't live with him." "It seems that you have a different opinion on this transaction," Seal said, squinting dangerously at Blake. Blake was fearless, looked at Seal and replied, "That's right, the ring you were looking for is an extremely powerful creation of black magic, and it can even affect the minds of those who are close to it. As a student of Dumbledore, I have a hard time imagining what you want such a powerful creature of dark magic to do. I have to admit that I have begun to doubt your identity. And, if I guess right, you've been hiding this from your teacher Dumbledore from the beginning to the end. No, it should be said that you are hiding it from everyone, so before clarifying your purpose, I don't think I'd be foolish enough to give you the ring." After hearing what Black said, Charles, who was still nervous, was relieved and put away the wand in his hand. When Charles saw Black just now, he was really worried that Black was bewitched by Voldemort's Horcrux. But seeing Blake's worry, Seal finally felt relieved. Seeing Seal put away his wand, Blake was obviously stunned for a moment. What kind of behavior exceeded Blake's expectations? And then Blake thought about it and put away his wand. She stared blankly at Charles. Well, your worries are not unreasonable. I will tell you the answer. If you don't mind, let's sit and talk. After he finished speaking, Seal didn't care about Black's actions. He grabbed a stool that fell to the ground and sat down. After thinking about it, he continued. First of all, what I can tell you is that it is indeed a powerful black magic creation. You should know about the Horcrux, right? The Horcrux. What are you looking for as a Horcrux? Blake was so surprised when he heard Ciel's words that he couldn't close his mouth. Although he knew that the ring was a powerful creation of dark magic, Blake never expected it to be a Horcrux. Whose Horcrux? What are you looking for the Horcrux for? Blake felt that the questions in his heart were getting more and more along with Ciel's answers. Seeing Blake's surprised appearance, Ciel waved his hand calmly, indicating that Blake should not be surprised. After all, the one who was surprised was still behind. Who else's Horcrux? Voldemort's, the one whose name can't be said. Ciel answered Blake's question calmly. After hearing Ciel's explanation, Blake felt that his brain was not enough, but Blake soon discovered the bright spot. Okay, even if it's the Horcrux of the mysterious man, but why did you hide this from Dumbledore? No matter what the reason, you shouldn't hide this from him. You find me to inquire about this matter from it struck me as weird at first. Quote. Hearing Black's question, Ciel smiled. He didn't expect Black to accept the fact that what he found was Voldemort's Horcrux really quickly. Charles smiled and continued, there must be a reason why you didn't tell the teacher. As for the reason, as long as you take out the ring, I can tell you now. Chapter 220-2 Horcrux destroyed. Black hesitated for a long time after hearing Ciel's words, then turned upstairs without saying a word. After a long time, this came down with a box. Charles, I believe in you. I hope you don't let me down. After speaking, Blake put the box on the ground, stepped back a few steps and stared at Charles, wanting to see what Charles would do. What comes out? Ciel looked at Blake with some amusement, stood up, walked to the box and opened it carefully. As soon as the box was opened, a black gas suddenly lifted the lid of the box. With the twisting of black energy, neither Ciel nor Blake unconsciously had the idea of wanting to take the ring in the box as their own. Fortunately, both of them are characters with extraordinary perseverance. Blake reacted immediately after shaking his head, and then immediately pulled out his wand and stared at Ciel, for fear that Ciel would do something dangerous. Ciel's side was just shaking his head, and Ciel, who reacted immediately, moved away from the box. It was also miraculous. Just as Ciel left the box, the black mist that had been floating on the ring disappeared abruptly. Only the ring with the resurrection stone lay quietly in the box, as if tempting people to take it. Ciel looked at Blake with some fear, and smiled a little embarrassedly. If nothing else, at least now Ciel knew how Harry and his group felt when they faced the pendant box. Seeing Sharner's slightly embarrassed expression, Blake shrugged indifferently. Don't worry, I was the same as you in the beginning. Fortunately, I still have some good things at home. After finishing speaking, he pointed to the box on the ground, and then said, this thing is the box where we used to store some black magic items in our house. It has a certain isolation ability. The reason why I was so slow is because I went back to my ancestral house. Take this thing. Hearing Blake's words, Ciel's eyes lit up obviously. If nothing else, this box is also a treasure, a big damn pure-blooded dog. Ciel looked at Blake leaning against the wall with a bit of resentment, and Blake looked at Ciel with a bit of amusement. Don't look at me like that. I think since you know me, you must also know that my family and I are not dealing with each other. If you like, I can send you a little stock of the Black family after everything is over. Hearing Blake's speech from Versailles like this, Charles's heart was instantly filled with lemons, sour, but on the surface he was still smiling, as if he was afraid of Blake's repentance. That's what you said, don't go back on it. Kulik laughed dumbly, nodded and signaled that he would never go back on it, and told Ciel to quickly deal with this damn Horcrux. Only then did Seal come to his senses and use the floating charm to carefully take the ring out of the box and place it on the table with a missing leg. Seal approached the ring slowly, and as Seal approached, black air slowly began to emerge from the ring again, and whispers began to ring in Seal's ears. It was not until Charles walked in front of the ring that he could hear the whisper clearly, "Take me, I will give you everything you want." The moment he heard the whispers clearly, Charles actually laughed and couldn't help sneering, "Ha ha ha, I want to destroy you, what should you do for me?" The ring seemed to be irritated by Seal's words, and the black air began to roll over constantly, slowly forming the appearance of a man. "Ignorant boy, are you questioning me?" Charles looked at the man who still had a nose at this time, and smiled helplessly. "Long time no see, Voldemort." Hearing Seal's words, Voldemort in the black gas froze for a moment, and then immediately reacted, "So it's you, ignorant boy." After hearing Voldemort's words, Seal was even happier, because Seal confirmed one thing: the Horcrux and the Horcrux sword are definitely not consciously linked, otherwise Voldemort shouldn't have forced himself here. Seeing the increasingly arrogant smile on Seal's face, Voldemort also quickly realized that Seal saw what he was saying, and Voldemort roared in anger, and in an instant, Seal was enveloped by a huge black air. When Seal woke up, he found himself standing in a dark place with no light around him, but Seal could clearly see his body, but it was very strange that no matter how hard Seal tried, except for his head, Seal unable to move any part of the body, it was as if someone had cast an immobilization spell. "Are you surprised, Charles?" A voice appeared in front of Seal along with the black mist, and Seal immediately recognized who it was, the Voldemort with a nose in the ring. "Don't be surprised, Charles, how about we have some appetizers first?" After speaking, the shadow turned into something like a portal, and the picture in the portal was a picture of a group of Death Eaters frantically torturing Seal's parents, and even some Death Eaters were discussing how to do it. To eat Seal's parents. Seal knew that all of this was an illusion, but he couldn't help his blood pressure keep rising. Voldemort grinned and floated beside Seal, continuing to tempt Seal. "Ha ha ha, how is it? Seal, come on, kill me. As long as you kill me, then these scenarios won't happen. You know the spell, it's simple, a flash of green light and you'll know all your worries." Seal tried his best to control his own thoughts. For some reason, Seal knew that all of this was an illusion, but he couldn't control himself, and he couldn't move at all, so he could only resist Voldemort's voice like this. "You are hesitating, resisting me. For what? Is it because of them?" Voldemort's voice was still slowly pouring into Seal's ears like a maggot with bones. As Voldemort's voice fell, a puff of black smoke flew out. The picture that emerged in the black smoke was Dumbledore and Hermione. It's just that Dumbledore and Hermione at this time have already died, like mummified corpses that have been dead for many years, hanging in the auditorium of Hogwarts. Seal looked at this expressionlessly, tried his best to suppress his emotions, and said to Voldemort, "I have to admit, Mr. Tom Riddle, you are indeed a powerful dark wizard, even if you only rely on a piece of soul," immediately thinking of taking advantage of my fears like Boggart had when the temptation failed. "But obviously you got it wrong." As Seal's voice fell, a flame like gold appeared on Seal's body. For a moment, the black mist that originally enveloped Seal was quickly withdrawn like ice that had encountered flames. After a while, Seal saw the dilapidated house of Screaming Shack again, and Sirius who was rushing over beside him. Seal didn't pay any attention to Sirius who was running over, but just stared coldly at the ring in front of him and Voldemort floating in the black smoke. "Voldemort, I'm sorry, you really angered me this time." After speaking, Seal felt that a heavy handle suddenly appeared in his hand, and Seal no longer hesitated. He clenched the handle and pulled it out. Gryffindor Sword of Golden Flame. Swinging the flaming Gryffindor sword, Seal no longer hesitated, and slashed at the gem base of the ring.